And just like that, we're live with Jason Thatcher, the homie.
Morning, mate.
So a bit of an interesting story as to how you've become a guest on the Gypsy Tales podcast. So I didn't know Thatcher from a bar of soap until February this year. We went to do one of your tours in Vietnam. So my dad was raving about it. He did it in 2018, was raving about it. Come home, basically forced all of us to go on it with him the next year. Wasn't like a hard sell, obviously.
Yeah.
And then we went on that tour with you, and everyone got along amazing. And then you show up at Day in the Dirt this year, and then come on our Cape York trip. So I've only known you since February, and we've spent basically a month on holidays in remote locations on motorcycles.
Yeah, it has been a bit, a lot in a very short time.
So, but it's been very funny, and you're I'm just gonna move this a bit closer.
Yeah, mate.
And have you ever seen those Dos Equis ads for like the world's most interesting man?
Not really, no.
Oh, so there's this, you know, Dos Equis, the beer.
Yeah.
So there's an ad that they run, and it's he's kind of an older gentleman, much like yourself, and he
thanks, mate.
He's the world's most interesting man, and you're my version of the world's most interesting man, because every time we sit and have beer or wine or whatever after a ride, some fucking random story pops up, and I'm just like, who the fuck is this dude? So hopefully we can dig into a couple of those stories on the podcast.
There's a few stories, yeah.
The one about your brother last night was pretty classic, but we probably can't tell that one.
No, maybe not.
Oh, big problem.
Maybe big problem.
So before we, like, obviously you own the Vietnam Motorcycle Tours, which runs out of Vietnam, and then Cambodia Motorcycle Tours, and then you own a charity called Global Village Housing, which builds houses for very, very, very underprivileged children and families in Cambodia. But before we get into all that, like, where did you kind of get your start? Like, has everything kind of for you revolved around motorcycles, and then that's been what sort of like guided everything that you've done in the businesses that you've got into and that sort of stuff? Like, where did it all sort of start for you?
Probably when I was about 15, left school, got an apprenticeship, always wanted a motorbike. My mother wouldn't let me have one. Then I saved money and bought a motorbike. Lived in a small country town.
In Victoria, right?
That's right, in Gippsland. I had friends that had bikes, but, you know, at the end of the day, I was normally riding on my own. I started buying forestry maps and essentially started doing a lot of remote riding on my own in the high country. Yeah. And it was great adventure, you know. Often I was getting stuck on my own and didn't have much mechanical knowledge and things like that, and
still don't, arguably.
Well, I've seen yours, mate. I think we're on par.
Opening a can of worms there. That was one thing that really struck me with like the Vietnam ride that we did. You'd sort of always go, like, you're always going off and doing your own little thing, and then on the way here, like, following you on Facebook and stuff, you just, even Dad was like, fucking Thatcher, man, like, he always just finds some random thing. And like, we've driven between Brisbane and Cairns 1,000 times, never camped on any of the rivers and the shit. Like, you always seem to find some kind of little adventure. So obviously that's been like a thing. Yeah,
it definitely is. I like getting into these places, and just because there are places around, you just got to dig a bit deeper. And also for the sense of not only adventure, but also for tours, you want to be going to places that you can basically say, well, no one else goes here because we know we're the only ones that go there. And I think the big sell and the good interest is doing something that you really like personally. Yeah. And if you stick with that, that's what people, they like themselves, because you can, you know, you're not going to be on a guided bus tour or anything like that. It's that, you know. It just all clicked though with, like, from being on the tour and then just seeing you as a person. Right. Like, you're actually, so I wondered if that was a thing that you've always just been like this random adventure dude. Like, I wondered where that come from, you know? Yeah. I think when I was younger, a lot of my friends thought it was a bit odd. You are a bit odd. Thanks, mate. Well, I kind of like a bit odd rather than just being that generic. But yeah, no, I do like that disappearing and going into places and checking things out. And
Yeah.
That's adventure, isn't it?
Yeah. And what was the original allure of a motorcycle to you? Because, like, for us, it's easy. Like, Dad was a motorcycle. Like, you've seen how hardcore into bikes he is. So for us, my earliest memories are on a motorcycle. It's been such a consistent theme throughout my life.
Yeah.
But it's interesting for you, it's like at 15, you're like, want to get a motorcycle.
Yeah. I mean, I did actually learn to ride. My first ever bike I rode was a Montesa trials bike when I was 8 years old.
Really?
And that was very briefly. It was a friend of mine's father owned it. And I think that was a thing.
Yeah.
And I think motorcycles have always appealed to me because they offer that adventure.
Yeah.
That's the ticket to, a bit of freedom and stuff like that. So, definitely that was always a thing.
I'm only just figuring that adventure side of it out because for me, I was just into motocross. Like, that's all I wanted to do. The racing, and you've seen how competitive I am, like, in the way that I am with, like, jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. Like, that's like a thing. I like to be obsessed with a thing that can get better. And for me, that was motocross. Like, every day you do a lap time, and it's whether it's by 100th or a 10th or, like, I don't give a fuck as long as I'm doing it. It doesn't matter how repetitive or I just like that.
Yeah.
And I never really, a motorcycle to me was never like this ticket to freedom or an adventure thing. I just didn't look at it through that lens. And then this year in Vietnam, that was the first time where I was like, fuck, like, we've literally just rode across a country. We saw the most random shit ever.
Yeah.
And then again in Cape York sort of took it even further because we were really in some remote sort of areas, and it was an adventure.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, that's right. As the years have gone on, I tend to be more and more adventurous and really finding, deeper places. And like I said a while ago, I did Hong Song Dong Cave, which is the biggest cave in the world, and spent 6 days underground. And
what was that about? You didn't tell me that.
Didn't I?
No.
I thought I did.
See, the most interesting man in the world.
So I was, I think when I went in, there had been less than 100 people in the world inside the cave.
Where is that?
It's just outside of Phong Nha. We kind of went past it on the Western Ho Chi Minh Trail. And overall the hike's 55 Ks. It's pretty solid.
No, you did tell me about this actually, yeah.
And then I was with the original team that explored the cave originally and stuff. They lead the tours. They're the only ones who've actually got the license to go in there. And when I pulled out my basic diving gear, they go, "That's the first." I go, "What do you mean?" They go, "You're the first person to bring basic diving gear into the cave." So
really, so no one had dived the cave before you?
Yeah. Yeah, and it was very basic gear, and I just went for a bit of a look around because there's water that runs through the cave.
Yeah,
but that was cool.
And so, what was the? It's a 55K hike to get into it, so it's like mostly you're climbing up like a mountain, or how does it work?
You go down from the western.
What was the name of it again?
Hong Song Dong Cave.
Hong Song Dong. Pull it up. We're gonna get a visual.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. A huge cave, a bit of a story to it. It was only found not that many years ago. It's got, as you can see there, it's got its own forest in the middle, and I've been to all those little spots there. It's off the hook. It's certainly not for someone that
doesn't have experience.
Well, and they actually said, so there's a bit of a criteria, you got to fill in questionnaires and all that to be accepted to go on it. And of course, a lot of people lie about their abilities and all that. And they were saying at the time that 2/3 of the people that were doing the cave couldn't get through.
Really?
Yeah, and it was quite hard. Hardest thing I've ever done on my feet.
Really? Yeah. And so what is it? Just a long hike to get into it, or once you're in the cave, you've got to like go through it a bunch? Or
so it's from the Western Ho Chi Minh Trail, you drop down off the road. It's a really steep climb, steady climb down, get down to a valley floor, follow the river. Then you go through a cave called Hang En, and then continue your way. The cave itself was actually originally found by a poacher. The British Cavern Association had been exploring caves since the late 90s in Vietnam. And then they'd heard through some locals about this story of this guy, he'd found this cave and it had this mist coming out and it was making a noise and all that. So they eventually found the guy and they said to him, well, where's this cave? And he goes, well, I don't really remember. He was poaching with these other party, big storm.
What were they trying to poach?
Oh, I think they were poaching wildlife or whatever they do, unfortunately.
What sort of wildlife would be in there?
Oh, still tigers and...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No
tigers
shit.
and monkeys and elephants and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because it's very remote and steep terrain, and it works its way across to Laos. So anyway, I think they kind of like commissioned this guy to try and find it, and it took quite some time to find it. And the actual cave entrance is really small considering the size of the cave. So you, if you're like 150 meters away from the cave entrance, you wouldn't actually know it was there. And so what he was saying about and you didn't go inside because it's quite steep. You've actually got to abseil into the cave.
Really?
Yeah. And so the noise is there's a river that runs through the cave, and essentially I think that's what's carved the cave into its size, so it floods every year.
Yeah.
Then it's got its own sort of atmosphere in there, so it's got its own cloud system. And what was coming out of the entrance was this foggy cloud. And they were saying, from my limited knowledge of caves, if there's cloud or mist coming out of a cave, that's a big indication it's huge.
Really?
And of course,
because it would have its own atmosphere or whatever.
That's right. So, yeah, and so once, of course, I went in there, and I think they measured it with laser or whatever it is. And it turns out to be the biggest cave in the world. And there's been less people inside the cave than people who have been to the top of Mount Everest.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah, I did it in 2014.
And how long did it take? Like, what was the trip? You've obviously got a camp to do it?
Yeah, camping all the way. You've got porters that carry majority of the gear in and out.
Yeah.
So essentially you just got a day pack. You've got a helmet and headlight on. You turn that off, it's pitch black.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is big.
And what was the diving like?
Oh, I didn't really see much, to be honest. There was nothing to rave. Oh, no. There was sort of like some small fish and stuff like that, but I didn't sort of discover any unique species or anything like that.
How did the fish get into a cave like that? I guess the water's got to come from somewhere, right?
it would be the flooding.
Yeah, okay.
I think they say that the water itself actually comes through from Laos.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's like the water was... Dad was saying the water at the Punsan Bay was coming from New Guinea or something because of like all the springs that go like under the...
That's right, it does. Mm-hmm.
So, when did you say you did that? 2015?
14.
Yeah, okay. So what was your original like dealings with Vietnam, and like that? It's obviously captivated you to the point where like you've got a house there, you've run the tours there, you've explored all through that country. Like, what was it about that area that originally got you fascinated? When
I was growing up as a kid, my stepfather's brother was one of the first regiments that went over for the Vietnam War. He was already in the army. Yeah. And so, I think he'd done like a couple of stints over there, and I'd often hear about them talking about the, different things. And so I was always quite interested in about, the Vietnam War and the people and all that sort of thing, and Cambodia as well. So I went there first time in 2002, so really not that long ago.
Yeah, right.
And in fact, that was my first overseas holiday. Was,
no shit.
Vietnam. But it's insane how much it's changed just in that sort of 17 years. It's been pretty crazy, really. And
do you just think that's like a Western influence, or that it's developed more, or like the manufacturing? Like, what has changed about it?
Everything. I mean, it's just opened up now. More so even now with the issue between China and America with the trade wars and that sort of thing. It's just everything's happening in Vietnam. Vietnamese are very enterprising people, smart, hardworking, great people. Awesome people to hang around. It's stunning country.
It is an amazing countryside.
I mean, I think you'd be pretty pushed to find anywhere more stunning particularly in Asia, than Vietnam through the Central Highlands. And it's just the landscapes, getting into remote villages. It was, to me, just a massive draw card.
Yeah.
Just seeing, I think a lot of it's the culture.
Yeah.
It's just got that such deep culture that's, that we just don't have that in Australia.
Yeah.
I love it.
And what was the first, what did you do on that first trip? Did you have any intentions then of starting anything?
No, not at all. No, I purely just went there for a look. And then I come back. It was certainly quite a big eye opener to me.
Was that your first time seeing legitimate poverty and stuff like that?
Yeah.
That's always pretty heavy when you go to a third world country for the first time.
Yeah, I found it quite confronting. Certainly felt out of my depth, and I think it was a really good thing for me to do that. And then when I come back, it was just sort of game on. I was keen to go back, and eventually I organised to do a ride.
Yeah.
And then once I started riding, that was a big thing. I was getting into places that no one had been before, and I just thought, can't believe that no one's doing this. And there was actually a couple of local tour operators kicking around, but they were pretty
dodgy.
Yeah. Well,
I got to text Sam and tell him to turn that music down. He's killing me right now.
You got to, it was one of those things that to hire a bike in the country, you'd be lucky if it had either brakes on the front or a brake on the back.
Yeah.
Exhaust would be wide on. Yeah, ball tyres. Just
exhaust would be wide on.
Yeah. All that sort of thing.
All that. Yeah, I know. I see what you're saying. But yeah, so you did that first trip, and then is that what then sparked your interest to go all right, I'm gonna do this sort of tour thing, or?
Yeah, I certainly thought that there was a good opportunity there, and then once because I was touring on my own, I had all this, started getting all these ideas and things like that. You
do have a lot of time to think on a bike when you're sort of touring around.
You do. And I think, it's a really good thing in itself. And then I was kind of, once I did get something going, I started as a bit of a hobby. And I thought, if I could cover my odd flight here and there, that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Bought a couple of bikes and started doing a bit of marketing. I'm pretty good at marketing and stuff. And a bit of here, bit of there. And it just started taking off. Certainly a bit of, a fair bit of hard work in the end. And sort of pushing the boundaries too, because for Westerners doing that type of work in the country, it was a bit of a new thing.
Yeah.
So, we're sort of flying under the radar a bit. And then, just sort of growing and getting the right connections and being properly registered and that sort of stuff. And
are you ever properly registered though in Vietnam?
No, but really, we are a company and all that there. Yeah.
No, just we get these, we got licenses and stuff, and it's you've kind of got a lot. I have a Vietnamese driver's license, but it's do you really have a Vietnamese driver's license?
Well, actually, interesting enough, because it has been an issue for Australian riders, because essentially an Australian international license is not
doesn't really mean anything.
No, in Vietnam.
I don't think it really means anything anywhere though, because that was the same thing in the US. I never got one of those international driver's license because I asked somebody over there, and I actually had to go to court once for not having a California driver's license.
All right.
And basically they can be dicks to the point where if you don't have a California driver's license, you technically can't drive in California.
Right.
So even if you come from Texas, come from anywhere, they can technically write you off for anything. So all those, I used to just laugh. Mum used to stress about getting international licenses and stuff when they went over there. I was like, just don't even bother. Yeah,
so we've now gone through the hoops and hurdles, and we are in fact the only operator in the country doing official licensing. So it's a temporary license while you're touring with us in the country, but it is a real license. And interesting enough, we actually found the official government site where you can go on there, you've got your license number that you receive from there. Type that number in. If your name appears, it's real.
Really?
If it doesn't appear, it's not real. Which is interesting because once we started doing it, I got my license out, which I've had for years over there. Typed my number in, nothing. So all these years, I've actually been running a fake license. Not that I've actually ever been asked for it.
Yeah.
So now I've just gone through the hoops and hurdles to get a real one myself.
So how long from that first trip until you guys actually started running like the tours? And how big was the first? Was it kind of small to start with, or
2 riders
for the first one?
Yeah.
Damn, that would have been crazy.
Yeah, 2 riders. So sort of late 07 was officially when we kicked off, and then things really sort of started happening in 08.
Yeah.
And that's when I sort of started making. I kind of had a bit of an exit strategy for my business in Australia, and I had a bit of a 3-year plan to get out of that, and that sort of turned into about 4 years. But yeah, started marketing the tours, and kicked on, and now we've had groups up to 30 riders at a time.
Yeah.
And
it's a super like well-oiled thing nowadays.
Yeah.
Like basically we landed, you guys had a driver pick us up once we got out of the airport, and had to pay for Maddie to leave the airport. And then you get there, all the bikes are laid out. There's 2 support vehicles. One takes all the bags and a spare bike, and then there's a van that actually stops behind you because the truck sort of will go like a different way to sort of meet you at the hotel. And then basically every morning, all we had to do was get up, leave the hotel, which are all nice hotels, and just ride for however many kilometers it was through the countryside. And really there's not a lot of highway riding or anything like that. It's very very like, I guess your slogan is see the real Vietnam, and that's really what it is. Like you go into some crazy places. No, we certainly that is the thing. Keeping off the main highways, getting into these twisty mountain back roads and through these remote villages. And the big thing for a lot of people is the kids waving at you. They just stand there waving at you, and all the locals are super friendly, and pretty much like everyone wants to wave at you the whole time. That it's like a motorcade of rock stars sort of touring through the country.
I say to people, if you want to experience what it feels like to be famous, come and ride with us in Vietnam, because it's just incredible.
Especially like we had Ricky and Ash with us, and like 2 blonde girls, and like everyone's freaking out on the girls. Everywhere you went, they wanted to take photos with the girls and stuff. Even
that's right, because pretty much everyone in Asia's got dark hair. They're so high and dark hair, so blondes stand out. And so it's quite a novelty to them as well.
And then so when did it get to the point where you're like, okay, this is like this is a lifestyle now, like this is how I'm sort of gonna like spend my time?
It took a while. Like I literally sort of was running out of money on a regular basis and just going, this is, so I just kept working at it, pushing to get obviously more tours and the likes. And so that was the real thing. I guess it's like any business. When you start a business it's hard work. You've got to put solid effort into it. And, it's easy for an outsider to look at anyone's business and go, hey, that's an awesome business, I want to get into it. They just don't, people don't realise how much work you need to put into it. I think realistically, I think maybe from about 2010, 2011, I knew it was really...
So it was like 4 or 5 years of...
So, I still had a small stream of income coming from other things. So that sort of helped along the way. Working out marketing strategies, having the right team. As you know, meeting our guides and crew, I mean, they really make the tours. And often a lot of people say, they just absolutely love them. And so they're really good. And I've also had a very much a strong focus on looking after the team and crew well. So they're really well paid.
Because you pay like Western wages pretty much.
Pretty much, yeah. And so, not only are they great guys, they love their work and they're super loyal. And if I'm not there, everything runs like clockwork. And we've got a really good team. that's certainly important to have.
Yeah, we got on so well with like all the guys, and it's
great.
like there's so much like, I don't know, they just make it so fun. It's funny too how the first few days everyone's figuring each other out. Like mum and dad was different because they sort of knew them all from the tour before, but we're all sort of, you know, like Leon and Benny, and you know, you're sort of figuring these dudes out, and after 3 days it's like fucking 10 bottles of vodka on the table and everyone's getting lit up, and you know, it's sort of like, it's such a cool way to meet interesting people. And if you're I mean, it sounds like we're doing a fucking ad here, but like it was such a it's such a great experience, you know. And I actually haven't spoke about it that much on the podcast, but it was like, you know, people are, it's like-minded people. Yeah. If you, it's a definitely a certain type of person that is going to want to spend 10 days on a motorcycle through a, you know, an Asian country. So it's like already you've kind of got a bit of a box of certain eclectic people, and then you sort of mix them all together. But by that, you know, that 3-4 day mark, everyone's really sort of gelled, and there's like a really cool group vibe going, you know.
I say to people that the real highlight of the tours these days for me is the people that I meet and the friendships that they form. So essentially, you know, our tours are very much marketed for experienced riders only. So we don't cater for like backpackers and first timers. I mean, why would you want to go on a big motorbike tour, particularly in another country, and you're riding with people that have
very limited experience? That's
right. So you've got that common interest already. Everyone's motorbike riders, and you know, got that interest. And the friendships are the form that often, you know, we have these open tour events that anyone can jump on. And of course, you know, no one knows one another, you know, or there could be a couple of friends or whatever. And that's right. And by the end of the tour, everyone's such good friends. And we've had people that have come back for another tour, and it's the same group that didn't know one another, and they've all become such good friends and stuff like that. So, yeah, no, that's definitely a real highlight.
Well, that's sort of how it was with us, like, Leon and Benny and those boys, and then it's pretty cool. Like since Vietnam, then you jumped on board and sponsored Toby's trophy truck, and then Leon flew out in his helicopter. You guys flew out from there. So like the whole, I don't know, it seemed like the whole crew just like we've just stayed together for basically this whole year, and then obviously Cape York. Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's how it's kind of been happening for a number of years, and it's amazing. It's such a cool thing to just see that. Again, it's sort of that common interest, you know, like the fact that you're it's set like an experienced rider, and then you're you know, you've got that common interest. It's pretty easy to stay friends and sort of like create that friendship. And it's not, the thing too that I would tell people, it's not easy. Like, it's not an easy ride. I wouldn't say you just go there and it's just like 25 minutes till the next spot. Like some days you're doing big days, a lot of turns, a lot of traffic. You know, you need to be on your shit. But I think that is what makes people bond even more, is because by the end of it, when that beer's there and it's icy cold, like you fucking earn that beer. And I think everyone feels like they have earned that beer together, which makes it even better. Yeah,
it does definitely feel like a real achievement. It's a lot of adventure. You know, you're in a different country, you're riding on the opposite side of the road.
With bikes that are different to what you'd normally ride.
Yeah, that's right. The locals, dealing with how the locals ride. And once you get the feel through it, you know, it's kind of, because some people say, oh my God, how can you ride in Vietnam? I've seen the traffic over there and it's crazy. And I go, well, we actually don't. It
works.
It does work. You know, I say to people, it's actually easier to ride than it is to cross the road. And once you're in it, I mean, when you look at, you know, there might be mum riding the kids to school, and they got a couple of kids asleep and a baby and the shopping and all that sort of stuff. It does work really well.
Yeah, the first. It's sort of the same as Cape York. Like, this is sort of why I've been liking doing these trips lately, is because you're so out of your comfort zone on the first couple of days. Yeah, everything's new. The bikes are new. The way that people ride in the country's new. You're dealing with the traffic. You're sort of on edge the whole time. You're worrying about different things, and then after a couple of days, this thing that was so out of your comfort zone it's like your body just accepts it. Yeah. And then you sort of start to enjoy it. And it's such a cool thing to be like, you know, on edge about something and really, you know, kind of making sure, like hyper aware. and then you start to feel the flow of what's going on around you, and then it's like you sort of level up in a way. And then it was like that at Cape York as well.
Yeah, to me that's the draw card. Is pushing that boundary. And I mean, for us, there's riding through rivers and there's signs there, recent crocodile sightings, and going, sweet, that'd be good to do a wheelie through. And then sure enough, there was a crocodile on the other side of the river laying there in the sun.
Bad boy too.
Yeah.
Dude, where we pull up it's through Lama Lama National Park, which is like a Aboriginal reserve, and we stop at this lagoon. And Jason's like, I reckon there's any crocs in there. And I'm like, 100,000% there's crocodiles in there. And then he's so close to the water. And I'm like, bro, for real. Like, there's really crocs in there. Like, you cannot go near there, eh? And then we saw a croc, like, probably an hour after that on another one of the banks. It's no joke up there.
Yeah, there was we stopped at one place and I walked for a bit of a...
Oh, yeah. The Kendall River crossing.
Yeah, and I heard one go in the water.
Yeah, you just don't know they're there, right?
Yeah, it's cool. I like it.
It's fucking scary, though.
No, I like all that sort of thing.
Yeah, but there's so many people. Like, I remember...
Get eaten.
Yeah, we went up there once when we were young to, I want to say, like, Kaunyama or something, and then, like, an Asian tourist out of there.
Yeah, right.
Gone. Like, while we're up there. It used to happen a bunch, eh?
I mean, I say, I used to do bit of wreck diving and shark diving and stuff. And people used to go, man, that's like really dangerous diving with sharks. And I go, well, the good thing is, it's a bit like sharks. Well, if you get eaten by a shark, 100% front page. You get run over by a bus, you don't even get a mention. So, and they go, man, that's a really fucked up way of looking at things. And go, well, but it's true though, right?
You make a headline.
Yeah.
When did you get into the diving stuff? Because that's something like, I've been watching that Sailing La Vagabond.
Yeah.
That we were talking about that the other day.
That's so good.
Have you ever seen that? No. Type into YouTube Sailing La Vagabond right now. It will fucking blow your mind. Dude.
Yeah.
So
that is insane. I love that show.
We were talking. I first saw it. My buddy Andrew texted it to me. And it's like, you got to have a look at these dudes. And then I said something, and you're like, you said something about sailing. And then you were like, oh, there's this couple. I was like, dude, I've just started watching this YouTube channel. We were talking about the same thing. So they've got 1.12 million subscribers.
So they got a baby now. And I must have missed a couple of episodes because all of a sudden there was this baby. I'm going, where did they get this kid from?
It is the most gorgeous kid you've ever seen as well. But yeah, basically this couple, I watched a thing on like how they met. I want to go back. We're living an interesting time where this is like a thing. It's, I guess, the same as this podcast. But yeah, so I'm going to actually go back. I'm going to stop watching all the new stuff and I'm going to go back and I'm going to watch it from the very first episode.
Yeah,
because it's like a crazy, like almost like a TV series, but it's like self-produced. So yeah, that's their little baby Lenny.
Yeah, it's just so well done, and I just love how the fact she goes spearfishing. Yeah, and
have you watched the one where they go?
And they both look like
sharks?
They kind of look like a bit of a Hollywood couple, aren't they? Like, I mean, they're both very good looking,
quintessential hot Australian couple.
Yeah,
have you ever seen them?
Nah, this to me is Jack Freestone and Alana.
Yeah.
Diving.
Oh, 100%. So, but yeah, so I was listening to like the story of how they met, and because I'm like, I'll watch this, and then I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna start it from zero. But she was working in this like somewhere in Mykonos, and then he was on the oil rigs, like flying in, flying out, and I think he'd stay in Greece, and then he bought a yacht, and I think essentially it was just a way for him to fucking get pussy, basically. Then he ends up meeting her and takes her for a sail,
and he'd done modified there, by the way.
I know, he's killing it. But so they went on this sail, and he was saying, or they were both sort of telling this story of like, it was basically the best sail you could ever have. Like there was enough wind to sail, but there wasn't a ripple of like a ripple on the water. So it was just this perfect day. And basically he asked her then to like move on to this boat. And I think that's sort of extreme paraphrasing here, but that was 5 years ago, dude. And they've got what, 3 boats since then. I think they've gone up through like 3 yachts.
Yeah, that's right. They're on from when I first started watching them, they're on a monohull.
And do they produce this all themselves?
They make it all themselves, man.
It's legit.
Yeah, it's insane. So like that, and you can see. I watched a couple of their older
and I love the
videos.
spear fishing.
Oh yeah, dude. There was an episode that I watched yesterday where they went to some island. It's like called Shark Island or something, with all the tiger sharks in the Caribbean, and they were diving with these tiger sharks. So yeah, they do all of them themselves. But you watch the production quality, like you can see that it was just a very basic sort of production, and then they've just gotten so much better, like over 5 years of producing content. I'm fully captivated by them at the moment, and I want them to come on the podcast so bad. I think it'd be so crazy. No, they definitely are naturals at what they do. They don't try hard at all. No. But it's crazy, like that's the time that we live in now, and I think that it makes stuff like what you're doing even so much easier to be successful, because people can share these stories now of like going to Vietnam, doing these kind of tours. And I think people like these guys make it's like aspirational now to like go out and like you can go on an adventure. Anyone can do it. And I think it's one of those things. You remember there was 2 English couples that were on tour with us. And there was the father and daughter. Yeah. And she was saying she'd been to Vietnam before. Yeah. And she didn't ride. And she'd been right from the south to the north. And she said she thought she'd seen all of it. And then she come back and she was pillion with her dad. And she just said she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She said it was just a whole new level, and she didn't even know that existed. Yeah. And that was the thing, and that is the thing for us, is to get the people to really see, push your boundaries a little bit. Yeah. Get away from these hotels, and sitting around pools and, following people from one city to another, and get out into these. And also you're supporting these local villages. We're buying, whether it's their beer or local food and stuff like that. So it works, in a lot of different levels. That's a new trend that I've seen amongst a lot of my friends, a lot of just people in general, is that whole like holiday to go and do nothing thing is sort of dying out now, eh? Yeah. Like I'm pretty well fucked when I come back from a holiday. Like I'm exhausted. I need to have like days of like my normal life almost feels more cruisy than my holidays these days. Yeah, and that's how it should be. It's all about adventure. Why would you go on the other side of the world to sit in a hotel pool? Yeah. I mean, you might as well just sit in your own backyard. That was the thing for a long time though, right? I don't get that. I don't. But that used to be the thing. You'd go to Hawaii and then you'd sort of just lay on the beach and do basically nothing. But now when I think about Hawaii, I think about diving, I think about volcanoes, I think about all these crazy hikes. It just seems people that go hunting now that are like traveling the world to hunt, and guys like these just literally traveling around the world on a boat for 5 years, I mean there's one there. It's had 4.1 million views. Oh yeah. Nothing to do with the thumbnail. No, nothing at all. But yeah, no, it's like it's a crazy trend that's happening, and not like I think that. Well, I mean, Vietnam was probably my first legitimate holiday in. Like I don't remember, because my life has been structured around. Yeah. Like I would travel to film. Like I'd go to Alaska and I'd be filming, but it was sort of like a holiday, but an adventure, because I was on a snowmobile with all my cameras and riding up a peak to try and get an angle, but I'm like 2 miles away from everybody else, like shooting. Yeah. So everything sort of felt like that in a way, but that was sort of my job. Yeah. But then Vietnam was probably the first time where I just had like a holiday, and it was that adventure style holiday. Yeah, I think with these adventure style holidays too, it's also opening the window and having that real perspective on how other people live. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, going into areas where there is poverty, but people go, and it's a big thing for Westerners. They go, but everyone's so happy. And they go, I don't get it,
And in some cases where I've worked in extreme poverty, as you know, over the years, you'll get that. I've worked with families that live on rubbish dumps, and they're all smiling, and people go, "What are they all smiling?" I go, "Well, they've literally got nothing to worry about."
Yeah.
You know, us living in the Western world, you know, got loans and debts and bills and this and that. These people got nothing. Their main thing is, you know, survival and having food and that's it. And I think that really, it's a very grounding experience for a lot of people, and it often has people walking away. Yeah, they take a bit of a look at themselves and go, "Geez, I really don't. I shouldn't be complaining like I do." And yeah, maybe I am a bit greedy or whatever, you know. And I think it's a good thing. I certainly found that changed my outlook on life.
Yeah,
dramatically.
I think it becomes easier to understand. Like people could say, like, oh, how could people in Asia kill and eat dogs? And you're like, well,
they've been eating hot dogs in Australia for years, right?
But it's like they've got nothing else to eat. Like it's very, you know what I mean? Like if people are doing that, it's like there's situations that people are in, and it's like it's so easy to be judgmental about different cultures when they don't do things the way that we do it. But it's like when you've got nothing and you just need to eat something, like, you know.
Well, and that's right. And I think in some sort of cases where people sort of said to me, you know, some people are quite upset about the whole dog thing, and it's probably it's not as big in Vietnam. It's
Vietnam. It's more China, eh?
Yeah, you know, but
it's just an example of those little cultural differences
that freaks people out.
But it just becomes easy to understand like where people are coming from when you just see like the poverty and how hard it is for people just to survive. And there's little things that, you know, you're like, okay, I get it. It's easy. It becomes easier not to judge certain things when you've sort of seen it firsthand, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that's all, you know, similar to people eating insects and all that.
Yeah.
Often all that started from not being able to obtain a normal source of protein, and it becomes a staple diet.
Well, we saw that was one of the more memorable parts of the trip was when I can't remember where we were, but we were coming round a corner and there's a cow hog-tied on a big old stick, and the whole village is there with this cow. And then this dude, literally as we come around the bend, just slits this cow's throat, and it just, the blood that come out of this thing, and like fucking rattled Ricky and Ash. like, and then right after it, someone run over a chicken. But it was like, that's fucking life. Like there's no like Woolworths to go and just get your steak in a cellophane, you know, foam container. Like you want steak? You got all this village and the villages, well, it was crazy too that some of them are like, it's just, there's the only space they've got. So there's a road that goes through a river, and there's just people that just build a little group of houses on either side of the road, and that's a village, and that's where they live. Yeah,
pretty much. You know, and talking about the fresh meat, that often, you know, there'll be some lady there, she's got a little table with some things freshly chopped up, and often it'll have like the cow's head, and that's showing
that's a cow.
That's the cow, and it's fresh because you can look at its eyes and things like that and go, yeah, it's fresh. Still, I think it's still mooing, but, you know.
Super fresh.
Yeah.
But yeah, we literally come around this turn, and as we hit the apex of the turn, we both like, that's weird, there's a cow there. Just cut its throat right as we looked at it, and it just sprayed blood everywhere. And like, I could feel, obviously you can't talk to each other on the bike, but Ricky's just like squeezed on, like, what the fuck? And it's like you become sort of desensitized to it in a way, because you're there for so long, and you're like living, it's not like that's just like a tour group and you're in and out, and then you see this little village for a day or half a day, and you walk around it, and then you go back to your tour, and you kind of go, it's like you literally for 10 days you're like living in all of these villages. And there was one day where we rode up that hill. It was when we were on the border of Laos, right up sort of the top. Okay. And then we had lunch with that family with the old guy with the Colonel jacket on. Yeah,
that's where they had the big bamboo water wheels that were feeding the rice terraces. Yeah. That's nice through there, isn't it?
They still had these water wheels that would carry water up to the rice fields that were made out of bamboo. Like everything is still, you should Google that shit. There's still so like, they just haven't changed.
TT and I found that little back road when we were mapping out the road to Lautour.
Yeah.
And I'm sure to this day, we are the only ones that go through that area.
The kids, some of them had never seen white people.
Yeah.
Never seen Westerners. Yeah. And like I can't remember. Look at them, man. Yeah. That's still what they use over there.
And often they can get wiped out each year from the seasonal rains and floods, so they rebuild them or move them and that sort of thing. But to watch the fact that they're all built out of bamboo and work so well, and it's amazing, Just the hard work that Vietnamese people, and I mean a lot of those countries through Asia, obviously, but like just the insane amounts of hard work that these guys put in. The Vietnamese are so good at growing things. So you'll be riding along, and if you do get on a main road, there might be like a medium strip in the middle, and there'll be a vegetable garden growing there. You're like, nothing's wasted. And they're just so great at all these fresh veggies. And it's a very rich country in that sense, they're so lucky that they've got the mountain range. It's a narrow country. They've got like over 2,000 kilometres of coastline. That's just visually stunning, isn't it? Really.
Well, I think that I've been a lot of places. Like I've been to Alaska. I've flown around Hawaii in helicopters. I've been all through South America. I've been all through the US. Obviously grew up in Cairns with the Daintree, all the way up to Cape York. I've been basically everywhere in Australia, Tasmania. So I've seen a lot of shit. And that ride that we did on the Western Ho Chi Minh Trail was fucking astounding. Like couldn't believe what I was seeing, and especially before we got to Phong Nha, and then you get to Phong Nha and there's all of the cliff faces. It's just the most insane, and it's untouched. There was just one road, thousands and thousands of bends, and there's no one on it, so we were just racing like 6 wide
Moto 3,
full Moto 3 style through the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and the whole time it's just such a trip. You're like, how is this real, and how is there nobody here? And it's like it's just never been touched. It's
insane landscape. So I haven't seen the most recent King Kong movie, but that was actually filmed just up past Phong Nha.
Type Phong Nha in, Mick. Yeah, it's insane.
PH?
Is it PH or is it FONG?
PHONG.
Yeah, Phong Nha. Yeah. That's the cave. So we went, that was the day that we went in and did
that one
tour
there with the river. So we went into that cave. So Phong Nha Cave, went in there by boat.
Yeah. How crazy is we put the drone up?
Yeah, just outside the entrance.
Yeah, so they've got the entrance to that cave, and then we put the drone up, and we were getting some drone footage. If you go on my personal Instagram, I think it's on there, but there's a picture of
all the bomb craters.
Yeah, so I put the drone up, and in the war, dude, they've tried to bomb that cave opening because the Viet Cong would be hiding stuff in the caves, because they obviously when you're flying over it, you can't see it. So then there was just bomb craters everywhere, and they've just filled up into these round bomb craters filled up like swimming pools, and they were just literally littered. That was one of the more eye-opening things, because about the war.
Well, and even I didn't know that those.
You didn't even know they were there.
Not right there. No.
How long have you been going to those caves for?
I think I went there the first time maybe about 9 years ago.
Really? So for 9 years, and you didn't know that was like a heavily bombed area? I mean, you probably assume it was heavily bombed.
Yeah. So the rice fields and that sort of back out towards the main road. Yeah. You could used to see the bomb craters there, but since they're sort of like being ploughed in and things like that, but that actual entrance where we put the drone up on that other side there, no one really goes into that spot except for the locals. But I'll be making a point. What I want to do next time I'm up there, I want to swim in one of the middle of those bomb craters that's full of water. And get a aerial shot. Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that was one of the more so that's just through the landscape, and it's still there. Like they just haven't really. I mean, I'm sure they would probably use them for like watering and stuff like that.
That river itself, it's actually not that far from the ocean, so they would bring supplies down and then up the river and then hide, because as you've seen how big that cave was inside.
Massive.
You can imagine. I've always said to people, I'd love to dive it, because I don't know of anyone that's actually dived in that cave, because it's fairly clear in there different times of the year. It'd be a great dive, because I'm sure there'd be stuff in the bottom,
like from the war.
Yeah, just stuff that's fallen off the boat or
whatever. You'd have to think so. Do you know how deep that cave is? Are those caves super deep?
I know, but I know that it goes through a long way. I think the back of that cave, well, they say that the river that feeds through that cave goes right through to Laos.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it's like 40 kilometres or something like that.
How far could you dive in and come back? Or with those cave dives?
Because the water goes up and down.
Yeah.
So certain times of the year you can penetrate the cave. So there are people going in there and going further in, a lot further than... I think we went in, like maybe a kilometre or something like that.
Yeah.
When we did it. But you can go a long way.
But what about diving though? Like how far do you think you could get into a cave like that with diving?
It depend on how far you can get the gear into, and then if you're only shallow diving, you can obviously go a lot further and that sort of thing.
So how does it? Have you done much cave diving stuff before? Because that's super interesting. Like
not so much freshwater stuff. So I've dived. Probably the best cave I've dived was the Cathedral Cave in Tasmania.
Oh, really?
Which is down near Port Arthur.
Yeah.
Eagle Hawk Neck, down that area, around Fortescue Bay. That's a pretty cool cave. Bit sketchy, but... With,
like, sharks and stuff? Or?
Well, yeah. I mean, sort of... You just get this big surges going through it, so you got to be really careful when the surge comes through, you don't get knocked out.
Yeah.
And the reason they call it the cathedral, as you can sort of see there's a lot of side entrances, so it kind of looks like light coming through a church window or something like that. And a lot of sharks go in there to rest.
What kind of sharks go in there?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, we'd seen a few different sharks when we were in there. I'm not really sure what they were. Nothing particularly big.
Yeah.
But when you come out of the cave, so there's a main entrance into the cave. We went in there, went offshore on this old shark cat, and the boat operator was an ex-ab diver, and they're all lunatics. Like, it's props out the water all the way. I don't know, the swell looks a bit big. No problem. So anyway, we go, and then once we get close to the cave, he goes, all right, you fuckers, once I get in there, get the fuck out. Otherwise, we're going to smash the boat up. Go, okay, well, that's pretty sketchy. And you got huge surge. So anyway, we're in, and we've got maps, and that's it. And then you got to come out. You can't come out the same way we went in. So you pop out through a side, and when you look up, because it's like 200-foot rock face or whatever, it's like a big washing machine with a surge hitting there. You got to push right out past that. Then you pop up, inflate your marker buoy, and then you got to wait for old mate to find you. And I think we were in the water for about, I don't know, half an hour. Well, it felt like half an hour before we got picked up. And so you just take turns in watching out for Noahs. And, I think that's probably the more sketchy part. It's when you're just bobbing around the water and waiting for it. Because one minute you see the boat, and because it's such...
The swells are so...
Yeah, and then next thing, once it's gone down, he's already gone. And, so it takes a while to get picked up. But, yeah, good fun, though.
And so what's the deal with, like, the caves? There's, like, actual cave maps, and you're sort of, like, trying to decipher where you're at based on, like, different landscapes.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple map. Just a rough sketch overall. And a couple of indications of where you should be popping out, so you with your buddy, and
What's the appeal of it?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's like anything. It's the adventure.
Yeah. Because it just seems like so much shit could go wrong.
It can. Because apparently it was a bit of a disaster 12 months to the day dot of when we had done it. So they were telling us that just before we were getting in the water. Yeah. So yeah, I think the appeal, it's just that doing things that other people don't do.
Yeah.
Good bragging rights.
It just seems so scary to be under, like, I'm not a big, like, we would do a lot of fishing and spear fishing, and it was shallow coral reefs, really.
Yeah.
I've never even scuba dived. Like, we'd done a lot of diving, like free diving and stuff like that. But like, I just never, like, we'd do some stuff where you're sort of on like the edge of the shelf.
Yeah.
And you're in, 30 foot of water, and then right there it's just blackness.
Yeah.
And you can, like, I've had times where I've swum over to like the edge where you can drop off, and you're just like, fuck all this. Like, that's space down there.
Yeah,
like, and that's really seems like what it is. Like, that's our version of outer space, is diving in really deep water.
Yeah,
and
they say that.
Seems fucking scary to me.
I dived the Nord, which is, oh no, that's on it there. The Nord, which is just nearby, and I think that's in 46 meters of water. And that was one of the deepest dives I've done. It's just an old wreck, and there's not much of it. It's pretty much some boilers and yeah, that's it. The Nord, yep.
And whereabouts is that?
Eagle Hawk Neck in Tasmania.
Yeah, right.
And it's pitch black once you're down there,
So those photos there would be just lit by the lights that are around it.
Yeah, it looks quite bright there actually. But yeah, no, it's pretty dark.
When did you start, like, when did you get into diving?
Early 2000, I think it was.
What? How old would you have been then?
30s.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, early 30s. So I got into it and just sort of, continue. Oh, but with that said, I actually haven't dived on air now for years. I do a bit of free diving and a bit of spear fishing when I get the opportunity. I just bought some new stuff in Cairns, actually.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so I've got 2 new guns in the back of the car.
The old Defender's rigged out now, isn't it?
It's
got all the toys on it.
It has, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't know whether it's an age thing or whatever, but I'm 31 now, and I feel like I'm just now finding.
Have you been sick for long?
No, not too long. One kidney. No, but I'm like starting to find now that I'm getting more enticed by this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, did that sort of happen to you, that as you started getting a bit
I think
older,
so.
you sort of wanted to do?
I've always been pretty adventurous anyway from a young age. I was always sort of disappearing into the bush and stuff like that. And I grew up with dogs. I always had dogs as a kid. I think they were probably my best mates, really, hanging out, going on these adventures together. And so I've definitely kind of always been that way inclined.
Yeah. It's we're kind of in a time now where it just feels like age doesn't really stop people from doing as much stuff anymore. Like, even Dad's such a good example of when we went up to Cape York. Like, he's 58, needs 2 knee replacements, but he rode every kilometre of that trip.
Yeah, and there's some pretty deep sand there. Like, we ride a bit of sand in Cambodia and stuff, and I'm surprised how sandy it is in places. But yeah, I was quite surprised it was even deeper heading up to Cape York on
that Jardine National Park.
Well, I think most of the sand would seem, actually probably the deepest was going to the very tip.
Oh, in that little, that was probably the most fun I had the whole time, mate.
That was good.
That was probably a 7K little 4-wheel drive trail. I wonder if that was the telly track still.
I don't know. Well, we did do the telly track and Frenchies.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of sand, but with Pete's bike being a bit heavier
and underpowered,
blown out knee and stuff like that. So it was hard for him to get the bike on top of the sand.
Yeah.
And stuff, but he did it.
I know. I couldn't. I thought, and obviously, like, he's done it before, so it's like he's done that ride a bunch of times. So it's not like it was this thing he needed to check off his list. Like, he could have easily just sat in the car and drunk beers the whole time. But I thought he'd do a couple days and then be like, you know what, fuck this. But he rode every single K. Like, it was so sick to see. I think he like fired everyone up too, because like he was on a 250. It was the heaviest bike. His knees are fucked. And like he was like I don't know, it seemed like everyone was so pumped.
And he had to tow nearly a brand new KTM.
I know, that made his whole life.
It did. He goes, "Have you still got that video?" I said, "I do."
One of the boys, got a 350 Kato, and the kill switch failed on it. So like he couldn't take the kill switch off, and we just couldn't get the thing going. So Dad had to tow him from the tip back to Punsan Bay, which was probably worked out to be about. It was probably a pretty decent ride, really, because we had to go all the way around the ride. It would have been over 20 Ks. And just made Dad's whole trip, He just thought it was the sickest thing ever that he was towing. He was on his rally board, and then Jason's riding past with like this, getting a selfie of Dad towing this thing, and Chook was just fucking over it. And Chook said it was super sketchy too, because Dad said to him, like, if it gets weird and gets sketchy, like we stole a bit of rope from a couple that was there, and he goes, if it gets sketchy, just hit the horn twice and I'll pull over. But he couldn't turn anything on. So he couldn't use the horn.
He was on the horn the whole way, and there was actually no beeping.
And we were riding beside him, and we're like, what do you want to do, bro? But it started getting late, so I was like, fuck this, I'm out.
Have you ever been towed before?
No, it's pretty hard,
It's the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
It's bad.
I've been towed through the jungle before.
I bet you have.
On like really sketchy terrain, and it's just like riding a wild bull.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. No, it's sketchy as.
What did you expect going into that Cape trip? Like, did it line up with like what you sort of thought?
I didn't think there'd be as much sort of highway.
Yeah.
You know, because there was a lot.
And by highway, we mean dirt highway.
Yeah, solid. So I was just wanting to Pete about that last night. So we actually did just over 3,000 kilometres.
Up and back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no joke,
Because there was a couple of days there we were doing like 500.
Yeah.
I'm just going, holy shit, man. And of course, my 525 started giving me a few problems.
I thought it was fucking best.
I thought it was the bloody battery. And then it was a solenoid or something. So sometimes the buttons start to work, and man, I'm just not used to kicking over 525s these days.
Yeah, so that we stopped at one point on the crab track coming through the Daintree, and we're on this river, and like none of us helped him, and he just was fucking losing his shit trying to start this 525. Oh, it was fucking the best thing ever. We had that one day where, like I was sort of saying with Sam, like I'm not a super risky rider. Like I'm not the guy. Like Toby just is full retard, and he'll just hold it on flat, and he just doesn't care. Like he'll just hit these. It doesn't scare him. But I'm like not that dude. I'm like, you know what? If something jumps out at me, if I hit a rock wrong, I'm just not built to take an impact at 130 kilometers an hour. And so
maybe big problem,
even with helmet on. So we that first day, the second day where we went from Laura to Cohen, we did that. We did that trail where me and you rode back, and like sitting on about 80 Ks, 90 Ks, and my bike was geared wrong the whole time. So that was probably the only thing I'd change, really.
I'm wondering if you're the only guy that's done the full Cairns to Cape and back on a motocross bike.
Yeah, unregistered 450 with 1452 gearing that you can ride Supercross on.
Yeah.
But so I'm like, the bike, fifth gear, pretty like comfortably to where it's not revving too hard and vibrating my fucking eyeballs out of my head, was about 90 Ks an hour, which was pissing everybody off because all the other boys could sit on like 110, 120 at that same sort of RPM.
Yeah.
So like the whole trip, I'm just going in fifth gear, just trying to fucking keep up with everybody on the highway sections. But on the, the tight sort of gravelly roads, the tight windy stuff, I was like 80 Ks, fourth, fifth year, like, sort of changing gears in between there. And I felt pretty risky. Yeah. And I was like, fuck, man, like this is like fast. And then the day that me and you did it, going backwards from Cohen to Laura, we were probably sitting on 130 for like, 40 minutes at a time?
Yeah, the average speed was about 130 clicks.
And I was like, I went from not really even wanting to be in fifth gear to every time I was in fifth gear, changing up, and like fifth gear felt like fourth gear.
Yeah.
And it was just such an eye-opening experience to like feel your human perspective on speed change. because when we were together, your bike's not really making that much noise at that speed.
No, it was just idling.
But I'm there thinking like, Thatcher's going to be bored. So I was trying to pin it. And then we stopped at the creek and Jason's like, "Yeah, we're going pretty fucking fast, eh?" If you want to back it down, because it's just it's a 1-lane road, and you're just sort of together. And the thing is, like, the dust, if I let him go ahead of me, then it's crazy dust for a while.
Yeah, you got to sit right on the wheel, or you get hosed rocks.
Yeah, and then if you go back, like if you're just out of the dust but you're behind, then you're in the rocks. So you just have to play this game the whole time. And it was funny, like one of the boys that come on the trip, how's this? First ride ever.
He does a cape.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, so he has never...
Risky.
He's a really good, like, world-class mountain bike rider.
Yeah, well,
like,
that obviously made a big difference.
He's beat Richie Rude before in a enduro race. Like, he was about to do the whole World Series. And so anyway, his experience on a motocross bike or on a motorbike is an ag bike. He works for World Trail, so he's one of the machine operators. So he would just ride through the forestry to get to his excavator every morning then ride out. Yeah. So that's his, like, experience. He bought the bike. I think he rode one time ever, but it was just like a little trail ride through the hills of Cairns. Gets on the bike, does the entire trip. And there was the first day I sort of gave him a bit of advice about just body positioning on like the flat turns, because he was sort of leaning with the bike on that flat gravel shit and moving like 80, 90 Ks. So he was like, "Oh, I just feel real unsteady, eh?" And I was like, "Well, fuck it oath, bro." Like,
nearly dead.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I just feel like my front wheel's going to go every time I turn." I was like, "Well, it is about to go." And so then I sort of told him the correct way to position your body on that. And then he really, like, he sort of figured it out. And there was one day before Frenchies. So when we stopped for lunch after we got lost near the quarry.
Was that
looking for the quarry, remember?
Yeah, and then we drowned a couple of bikes.
No. This was before that.
Oh, okay.
So remember we were looking for the quarry for ages, couldn't find it, and then we just drove on the road until we met the cars. We made some food on the side of the road, and then we drove to Frenchies, and then that was there was a couple of like those sort of water crossings and stuff, like the causeways. Yeah. So that bit of road was probably about 30, 25 Ks, and me and Muff were fucking sending it, and like I was so impressed by him, because he was keeping up and I was just pushing a little bit more. And like, I'm talking, we're going around these turns in 5th gear, just sliding the whole way around the turn, like just lighting it up. And Muff's right there. And I wasn't holding it on through the straight sort of thing. And he's just kept there. And I'm like, this is fucking unbelievable for a dude that's never rode a motorcycle before.
I couldn't believe it. And then it was insane.
We stopped that night. Then we did Frenchies. He actually looped it out in Frenchies. It was like a real tough 4-drive trail, but he's looped it out, and that was his first sort of, taste of having a crash. But we stopped that night, and I'm like, what does it feel like? Like, does it feel fast to you, or like, are you comfortable with how fast we're going? And he's like, oh, I'm not gonna lie, like, I was just sort of wondering if this was normal. He just didn't. I was like, nah, man, like, that's going pretty fucking fast, eh? Yeah. And he just hung. And then, like, there was one of the days when we went, remember when we went to the old Jardine crossing? The one that we couldn't get across, like we stopped and they dug out the other side with the excavator.
That's right, yeah.
That was probably some of the deepest.
100% you went across there, you'd be eaten alive.
Yeah, you're dead. Yeah. You're Gornskis.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we got to there, and then from riding there to the ferry, Muff just took off, and he was riding in like legitimate deep sand, and it's like the roads are in sand.
Yeah,
and
that's right. That was
deep there. And so the four drives, they sit down in the sand, and you get these two big ruts, and you really can't get in or out of them once you're there. And there's like trees that are growing right up to the side of it. So you can't even really lean into the turns that much, because you're going to just lean into trees. It's very, like, really technical riding.
Yeah, I banged my bars a couple of times on trees.
Yeah, I still got a little bit of a love bite there from the knuckle getting through the bark buster. But yeah, Muff just killed it. He just took off, and I was like, dude, like, it's so impressive for a guy to do that. And
absolutely.
even, he's like, how much oil do I put in my air filter? I'm like, bro, you're 1,500 kilometers into one of the coolest rides that you can ever do, and he's never done an air filter. It was fucking amazing.
Yeah. No, that was good.
On the pegs, standing up.
Yeah. I don't think he liked standing up. Well, he broke his wrist real bad. That's sort of what ended his mountain bike racing career.
Oh, yeah,
that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
Like, he just kept his levers kind of flat, like how moto dudes sort of set bikes up. And he was saying that, because I was saying like, all right, stand up, and I just basically in those sort of sandy sections, I just come in hot, lock it up, like get the rear end to where I'm going straight again, dump the clutch and go. And I was saying, do that a little bit instead of trying to like turn your way through. It just gets too tiring. And anyway, he was like, I just can't do it, And then he was saying that because he can't move his wrist, he couldn't actually get to the clutch.
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah,
but yeah, insane to do that ride like that, And he had no idea what to expect,
Yeah, I mean, obviously, clearly, the whole mountain bike being one of the world top riders
translates.
Yeah, I mean, but in a big way.
Yeah,
to go and do that ride.
He didn't look out of place at all, did he?
No, I would never have picked it at all.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
We the Pasco River crossing was pretty funny.
With the drowned bike.
Yeah.
So
what was said?
So Pete's going, all right, so we're going to get up to this river. When we get there, no one take a bike through. Wait. Just wait. And he said it about
here we go,
quite clearly about 3 times. So we roll up there and there's bikes in the river already, and big problem.
Fuel injected bikes.
Yep, drowned.
Don't like water.
Nah, and it's it's a super deep. Like you can see it's over like the bonnet of those cars. But so we get there, and it was so deep that we ended up having to put sticks through the wheels and like share ride. Everyone was completely soaked. It was like waist deep. Yeah,
because there was a couple of like holes, so you'd be carrying a bike, and next thing you kind of fall in a hole, and nearly everyone would go over with you.
And is this croc area here?
Nah, that's probably a little bit too. It's fresh water there, but it's probably a little bit too high up and too inland for the crocs there. I think that the boys thought there might have been a little bit more elevation there than it was, but I think it was only like 90 feet above sea level. So it's definitely not out of reach. Like if one wanted to be there, it could be there.
Yeah.
You should Google the old Jardine River crossing. This was crazy. Like, and I remember being a kid and Dad riding bikes across that river. Like, he was the only one out of the group. There was a few of them that wanted to ride it, but Dad ended up having to ride. Look at the fucking crocs there too. So that's the new one with the ferry. But yeah, those top ones, that's the old river crossing.
Yeah.
And they've ended up actually digging that out now on the other side of the river so that people can't cross there.
Yeah, so you have to use the ferry because the ferry was expensive, right?
It was like $40 or something.
No, wasn't it for the vehicles? It was like 130 or something.
Really? I think it was $40
it's only like
bikes, right?
50 meters across or something.
Oh, no way. But they were having to pull so many people out of the river, and the crocodiles there are just so thick. Like, it's right before Bamaga, so it's one of the the last sort of towns before you hit the tip. But they actually had to like dig it out with the excavator, so that people would stop trying to do the crossing. And we went there to see if like it was still possible, but Dad was just like, fucking shut it down, boys. There's no chance. But it's pretty shallow until you get to that other side, and then it sort of drops right off, and then that's what they ended up digging out. But coming into that old telly road into that old crossing was just so deep with sand day. Like, that was hard riding to get in and out of there.
I didn't know where the hell we were going, because at one point I took off and I was in front of everyone and riding, it's going, where the fuck's this going? I thought it was meant to be going to a river. And it just felt like I was just going for endless. I ended up stopping and waiting. I could hear the bikes coming and we're going the right way. But yeah, how's a guy riding that 800 GS.
Oh, dude.
The look on his face, it was near, what's it called, shotgun or whatever, with a
gunshot.
Gunshot.
Type that in, dude. You should see this. Like, it's this famous four-wheel drive, like drop-off sort of deal.
And there was two guys on KTM 690s, and they were pretty loaded up, so they were riding unsupported, and they looked like they were going fine. But man,
I would not have wanted to ride.
I briefly spoke to the guy on the GS, and he just goes, "Oh, I'm not really a bit of a novice rider."
Oh,
and it was
really? Look at that shit, dude.
And he had so much gear on his bike, and you know they're insanely heavy, those 800s. I mean,
as it is before you load it out,
man. I mean, one of those things, it'd fall on you, just crush your legs, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm glad I wasn't riding that thing.
We we saw them on the other side of Elliott Falls, and then one of them drowned their bikes in that little river crossing.
Yeah,
it's crazy to me, like the amount of people that would fucking drown their bikes trying to get across these rivers, and it's like you have to walk through, like you can't just go sight unseen because the water's so clear, everything looks shallow, and then you get to some of these rivers that I wouldn't know what to type in here, but they're so the soil is so dense with minerals that it goes like this crazy green, so you can't tell at all how deep it is. And then there's like the crocodiles everywhere, so it's like it becomes a bit of a thing to try and get across these rivers. But we spent maybe an hour and a half on the other side of the Pasco trying to get the bikes sorted out and going again.
Yeah,
easily.
Yeah, it did take a while, didn't it?
I wonder what would have happened if Dad wasn't there.
They'd still be there. Maybe skeletons, ant food.
Big problem.
Big problem. A bit like that Pajero running road tires, and it was this dude,
German dude, and these two chicks.
Yeah, and they were just like stuck. They had a camper trailer on the back, and it was just
he did
totally
everything wrong,
everything wrong. And he had his winch cable out, and we started digging a hole to put his spare wheel in to winch him out. But then the remote control for his winch was under the back, and he had all this stuff, and the doors of his car had locked, so he couldn't open the doors. He tried to climb in over the back seat. There was like push bikes and all that. So where the winch control was right under some sort of panel. So we just left him there, actually. No, well, we went and told some ranger, and they were gone when we went back through there, so I presume they were
like
right.
a week later.
Yeah.
But he goes, it was so funny because he's tried to take this caravan, and it's not big, like it's not hard to, I don't know how you get stuck in that particular thing, but perfect storm of like just fucking no idea.
Yeah.
But basically, so he gets in, road tyres, had about 40 PSI in the tyres, and then he's like, the trailer's kind of up like the camper van's up like that. So then he comes up with the bright idea to disconnect the caravan. So he disconnects the fucking caravan
in the middle of the river.
In the middle of the river.
Tow it by hand.
He's got this chick, one of the chicks that is with him. We're like, how much air have you got in your tyres? And he's like, oh, maybe 40 PSI. And we're like, on the sand. And then we're like, you're probably going to have to let them down there, big dog. So he's got this German lady, puts this fucking dive mask on. And she's
try and find the valve.
She's got a snorkel to try and find the valve so that she can let the fucking tyres down. And we were just like, bro, you've done everything wrong. And like, all these boys were over there, like trying to help him out. And me, Glenn, Maddie, Dad and Muff, we just dug. It's like this huge big riverbed, and it floods in the wet. But we just carved out like a bit of a beach chair sort of thing, and we just sat there as a peanut gallery, and we were just like, fuck this, we're out. This has been a long day as it is. It seemed like every single day there was something that happened, whether it was getting lost, because really none of us had that much of a clue where to go. Like, and it's been so long since Dad's been up there.
No one had a map.
None of us. We did the whole thing without a map either.
Yeah.
And we'd just have Fordsy was in the car, and so we had 3 support vehicles. Yeah. So we had 3 support vehicles, and then those boys would, and because I was on a fucking Supercross bike, I had to carry a litre of fuel with me at all times.
Well, lucky I had my fuel tanker.
Yeah, so he's got an oil rig, an offshore oil rig for a bike.
I got the long range tank on it, which was handy.
Yeah, it come in massively handy. So I had a Camelback with a a 1 litre fuel bottle on the back of it, so I carabined that to my back. Luckily, I didn't go over the bars and fucking break my spine on the thing
and explode.
Oh, so that's what I was thinking the whole time. I'm like, fuck this thing on my back. Like, that's a spinal injury waiting to happen.
Well, what was the guy's name on the first day? And Pete Tony. And I had Tony. We had to take him out.
Yeah, so one of the boys, we were on like a graded. They'd freshly graded this bit of road, and then it went into a dip, and then they just it's like they just got the grader and then gone, okay, fuck, 5 o'clock, reversed it out. So there was a ledge on this road, and he was wearing like a really heavy backpack, eh?
Yeah, I mean, when I pulled up, I could see he was in a lot of pain straight away. Time.
Yeah, and he's a tough old dude.
Yeah, and he goes, I'll just ride out my own. I'm going, no, man, we'll ride out with you. And so I took his pack, and it was full of tools. It must have been about like 15 kilo on his back, and obviously between hitting that big dip
and then the compression of the
and he actually broke
his vertebrae.
Broke a vertebrae in his lower back.
So he's out of action for like 3 months. He's just got to sit still.
So where did he ride back to? Like, what happens there?
We weren't that far out of Cairns. I think we're a few hours out, and we got to a little town. And
I think you got to like Palmer River Roadhouse or something like that.
Yeah, I wanted to call in an ambulance or something actually, and he was a pretty tough guy. And he goes, I'll be all right.
Yeah, he laid. We went and had a beer with him when we got back to Cairns. He laid on the ground at the Palmer River
Roadhouse. Oh, you realised you
caught
up with him?
Yeah. We went and saw him. So he laid on the ground for like 3 hours waiting for his son to come and grab him.
Yeah, that's how we sort of left him. The eagles were like circling above. And, we go, well, man, we need to go actually, but
it's been
you'll
good.
Be all right.
But then, Dad had my fuel bladder. So we did this old coach road which goes through to Maytown. So I'm on my bike and I'm like, I probably should grab that fuel, eh? And then I look around, I'm like, fuck, Dad's got the fuel. So then we had nothing. So luckily Muffin had a water bottle. He had a Camelback full of water and then a water bottle in his bag. And then so we had to stop. We had to undo all the bikes are fuel injected, so there's no fuel taps. So there's three dudes on Maddie's bike tipping into this little 1 litre. No, it wouldn't have even been a litre water bottle. And then I had to go over, fill that up, another litre, and then we took off. And then that was to get into Laura. And then 5 Ks from Laura, I took off in front of Maddie and Muff. 5 Ks from Laura, Maddie runs out of fuel. And I'm already at the pub drinking beers. And then I'm like, where the fuck are these guys? Like, they should be here by now. And so then I rode back to the rodeo grounds, which is like kind of across the street. Yeah. And I saw a dude, so I was like, I'm not going to ride down the trail. I was like, have you seen some bikes come past? After 30 of us come past on bikes. Yeah, no, everyone's at the pub. All right, sweet, get back there. They're not there. So it turns out that, Maddie runs out of fuel. Then they had to tip Muff's bike up and steal fuel from Muff's bike. But that was the story of the trip for me, was just like managing my fuel stocks.
Well, that's it. Because, I mean, that bike's only got, 6.5 litres, 7 litre tank or something.
Yeah, couldn't even be more than 7 litres. Yeah. And then that the one day, the second last day going from Cohen back to Lion's Den, it was fuck. I was over that day. Like, that was a day where I was pretty close to putting it on the trailer.
Yeah, that was long.
That was bad riding.
Yeah, that was really long.
Because we're on these just dirt sort of highways, and you just holding your bike as fast as it'll go. Like, there's just no, like, there's nothing to slow down for.
Well, I mean, you got to watch out for those dips over now and then.
That's true.
They'd seriously catch you out if you weren't on the ball. You know, you'd be riding along because it's all flat, and then all of a sudden the road dips, but you can't see how deep it is until you're on it.
Yeah.
And you could bin it really easy going through one of those.
Did you have any moments, like sketchy sort of moments?
Only when the road train come across, and then Matty goes, "Hey guys, you nearly hit that thing on the side of the road, you know, like the markers."
Yeah.
And going, yeah, that was pretty close, because the road trains come past, it just totally dust out, and then trying to overtake our own support vehicles on the way back.
Oh yeah,
because they're like hurling along with the trailers on, and you're sort of going, well, can I go? And, you don't want to be going past,
throwing rocks at the cars and shit.
Oh, yeah. So you got big yonnies coming at you left, right and centre. And, So I think that was probably the only rule.
My sketchiest moment was like 20 minutes into the trip. Like when we first got off the range, we rode up the range and then we got onto that gravel. And then we were going along the gravel and there was just a little causeway and it was dusty, but I was close to everyone. So I sort of just figured if I was close to everyone, there's going to be nothing really on the road to catch me out.
Yeah.
Because they're going right there. So I couldn't see, but I had faith that I was just going to follow what you guys are doing.
I like the faith bit.
Blind faith. And then I'm standing up on the front. There's no steg pegs on that thing. So you've really got to like put your weight forward to be comfortable standing up. And I just hit this fucking hole, dude, on the other side of a causeway. And my fucking hand come off, both feet come off. And I reckon if it wasn't for that steering dampener, I probably would have cartwheeled.
Yeah, right.
And I've just fucking got it back on and just gone. Well, I'm 20 minutes into this. I'm gonna die on the way. Like if
I'm not getting to the Cape.
If this keeps happening, man, I'm fucking done for. But that was sort of really it. There are a couple of times. Oh no, I had that one where. Remember when we first got onto the telly track and me and Maddie took off pretty quickly, and we were sort of going, and that was probably the first time on the trip I'd actually like really hooked in and had a crack.
Yeah. And
then it was just this sweet dirt four-wheel drive track. It was pretty much a motocross track, really. And like Matty had gone before me, so he'd pushed up these pretty sick berms out of the sand. So I was just following all those lines and just every turn just laying it in. And then I come into one probably from about fourth gear, and then I was standing up and sort of like counter steering the bike to sort of set it up for the next turn. And I'm in there, and then it hit a root and it just flicked my back end up in the air, and I'm just like, oh fuck, and I'm just watching the trail go past me and then into the trees, and then I ended up landing in the trees and I just fucking pinballed, man, from tree to tree, but nothing hit far enough along my handlebars that it completely turned my bars. It was just these little knocks, and I was just doing the fucking like crunching my eyes up, and then just got through. And I just hit both brakes, didn't touch a clutch, let the bike stall, and just basically try to stop it as fast as I could.
And did you have tunes playing at the same time while this is going on?
No,
because most of these guys had onboard music going on.
Yeah, well, Matty and Dad had theirs going. I forgot to bring headphones up there.
Yeah, I killed mine. So
you normally ride with headphones,
eh?
Yeah. I didn't have anything.
Yeah, so I actually, on an overseas trip marking out a new ride a while ago, it was when I killed my last iPod. And we were on this wooden boat. Well, I marked out this ride, and we were going down the bottom of Vietnam across into Cambodia. And I'd seen on the map you could get on a ferry and you cut across essentially where the bottom of the Mekong comes out to the ocean. And it would cut out about 4 hours of ride time. Going, oh, that's perfect. So we get down to the Stocklands and go, yeah, where's the ferry? And so the ferry was actually a big old wooden fishing boat that's no longer a fishing boat and just carries people. So on a skinny plank, we took each bike out there, and so we go what looks like an hour, and you cross like what's kind of a bit of a river. No, we're actually in the shipping channel, and going, holy fuck, there's an oil rig. And we had to go, because it was so shallow, we had to go right out. Anyway, and we got all the bikes tied on the front, and this is just me and a couple of mates and crew. And next thing we hear, the ropes are broken on the motorbikes and one's ready to fall in. So we shoot up the front of the boat, and it's starting to get pretty rough. And sure enough, one of the bikes is nearly in the drink. Me and TT become like human hockey straps, holding these bikes, and I'm looking, and this swell was getting bigger and bigger, and this boat's just launching on an angle across this swell. Man, I thought I was 100% going to die. It was and this went on for hours, right? So what I thought was going to be like an hour or whatever, we're on this boat for like 4 hours.
So to cut 4 hours off the ride, you sat on a death trap boat for 4 hours.
Oh, absolutely, man. That was super sketchy. Oh, and so what happened was there was so much waves and water coming over the bow of the boat killed my iPod. So, that's how the iPod died.
Yeah, I was like, fuck, how did we start this story? I was like, this is heavy.
Shortcuts are great.
The waves were so big coming over the bows of the boat. My boots, my adventure boots that I had on, they were full of water.
Really?
Yeah.
That is no
Yeah,
joke.
a couple of points there. I was actually ready to bail off the boat.
Really?
Oh, yeah, it was out of control. Yeah. I reckon out of all the sketchy things I've done in my life, that's probably number 2.
What's number 1?
I don't know, but can't remember what number 1 was. But
there's got to be some super sketchy situations that you've been in.
Yeah, been a few. Yeah.
I want to hear number 1. What stands out? Because like looking for those, you and TT do most of the mapping for the motorcycle tours that you do through Vietnam.
Yep.
So like, what's the process of that? Like you basically just look at a map and try and figure out cool shit, right?
Yeah. So between sort of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos, and pretty much we'll have a general point of where we want to go, but of course through that point we'll want to try and find back roads and all that sort of thing. So yeah, sometimes you might come to dead ends, landslides, roads are collapsed. Sometimes we don't always pick the best weather when we're going to go. It's just that window of opportunity. You go, all right, now we should go and map this ride. So yeah, there's been some sketchy things along the way, but yeah, nothing too bad. I think actually maybe that boat trip should be number 1.
What about with like diving and stuff like that you've done?
No, nothing really.
Because you're playing it super safe with that, right?
Yeah, probably some of the boat trips themselves of getting out to the dive location. Yeah, where you got all your gear on and it's just props out the water all the way. Yeah.
You see, like Deadliest Catch and stuff like that. You're just like, how the fuck can they actually be in those conditions, eh?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, isn't it?
We had one. My best mate in Cairns, he's obsessed with fishing, and so he now has like a 25-foot fishing boat or 30-foot fishing boat, and it's fucking awesome. But when we were kids, like that was his thing. He was going to buy like a tinny, so he's sort of done like the upgrades through his life, like starting from just a tiny tinny. And we used to do the most fucking dumb shit on that boat. There's been 2 times where I've gone out with him fishing where I was like, cool, Dad, that's it. I'm not coming back from this now. Like we went out off the Daintree one time with him, and we went out for fucking. That's when we were off the like at the shelf, like hours and hours, and you're taking jerry cans of fuel with you because it's only like a little outboard, 50 horsepower or 45 horsepower thing, and we were out there and it's like beautiful, calm day, perfect, all good, cleaned up with fish, and then this storm front come in, and Tyson was just. Classic, it's gonna be fine. I was like, we should fucking go. Like, let's at least get in a little bit to where at least we can get rescued if we capsize. Yeah. Because we're so far out now that we'll be dead by the time anyone fucking figures this out. So let's go at least closer. Like, I'm down to stay out and fish, but let's at least be smart. No, I reckon let's just give it 10 minutes. Like, we'll just see where it goes. Sure enough, this fucking front rolls in, and it's just this huge weight, and we're in this tiny tinny, me and him, and he is pinning it back, like, as fast as this thing will go. Like, he's just hit the panic buttons and just holding this fucking tinny wide open, and I've got a rope at the front of the boat, and I'm standing with, like, my feet all the way against the thing and just going back, and then we ended up getting back. Or I think we like almost ran out of fuel. We did run out of fuel at one point, and then we had to stop and try and fill this thing up while it's these huge fucking swells. So then that was the other thing. I was like, when is not going to get fuel in this boat? Like, how do we put fuel in it now? So yeah, anyway, it was one of those deals. But like, there's probably no more vulnerable feeling than being in the ocean, in that, like, when you're in that kind of situation, because there's no safety net. No,
especially when you're on an old fishing boat and there ain't no safety gear.
No, fuck no.
Big problem.
The guides on the tour that we had, there was like a couple of classic lines that have just become etched in our brains now. One of them, every time you stop, you'd get like Bow or TT, they'd go, come on, helmets on, nothing to see. And then the other one would be big problem. And then we're like, what happened to the bike? Oh, big problem. Someone throw their bike up. And it just
go, what happened to the big problem? Problem fixed.
No more problem.
No more problem.
Oh, fucking classic. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the Global Village Housing Project, which I'm keen to get something going through the podcast. I want to build a Gypsy Tales house in Cambodia.
Are you going to move into it?
I don't want to live there. I just want to build it.
Build yourself a holiday house on a rubbish dump in third world country.
So how does that work? So you were involved in charity stuff before, and then some weird shit went down in the charity, and then you decided to not raise money for someone else's charity and that you were going to do your own, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, as you know, I started doing a fair bit of riding in Cambodia, and we do dirt bike tours over there and stuff. And I, sort of a long story, but I got involved.
We got time, mate.
Yeah, I got involved with a charity over there. Worked as a self-funded volunteer, doing sort of project management, working with families living on rubbish dumps, essentially. And different bits and pieces, and sort of over a course of 4 years, I kind of call it my apprenticeship. I've seen the good, the bad, and the very dark of the charity world. I sort of left that quite jaded, actually. But during that time, I'd actually designed these houses for these families that I was working with on rubbish dumps, because the crazy thing is that when you live on a rubbish dump, you still actually pay rent to someone.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
How that works.
Yeah. And
so who's the dude collecting the rent?
Don't know, be like local mafia or something. It'll be someone, like in sketchy control. Yeah, or someone, be connected to the dump. I think sometimes even the families actually pay money, like royalties, to the people who run the rubbish dumps as well. So everyone's getting something. And of course, a lot of the families that I was working with living on rubbish dumps, their houses are made rubbish. And, the only way to fix a house made from rubbish is literally throw another piece of rubbish on it, like a tarpaulin or something like that. Can
you find that? Can you Google the Cambodia, just rubbish dump house or something, just to get a visual of how they're living?
Yeah, it's actually the first time I ever went to the dump. The dump that I went to originally was a dump out at Stung Min Che on the outskirts of Phnom Penh. I actually had a few stiff drinks after that, to say the least, because it was
super confronting.
Really confronting. Seeing these families and little kids, just like that, and the smell and the burning rubbish and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was pretty alarming. So I started working with a bit of an idea of designing like a cheap house. I sort of looked at timber, because actually one of the first things I built in Cambodia was a playground, of all things. The organisation I was working with, they had a community centre nearby the rubbish dump, and it was just all these kids running around. And I said, I wouldn't mind coming back actually building a playground for these kids and stuff, and climbing walls and all that, so which I did. So I looked at building the houses out of timber. The timber in Cambodia is quite expensive. And so anyway, and it's all carved out of the jungle and all that. As a kid growing up, I had a fair bit of work, background with working with metal fabrication. So I started looking into steel and all that. It was quite affordable. So designed a house, built some test houses, and become quite successful. So the houses are really small. With a family living on a rubbish dump, their average size house is usually about 2 meters by 2 meters, 3 meters by 3 meters. So of course you don't want to, if you're going to be gifting or building a home for a family, you don't want to be, because they're all built back to back, so you don't want to be knocking over the neighbour's house, giving someone a house. So where our houses are at the moment, the average size house is 3.6 by 3.6,
Which is this studio is bigger than that?
Yeah. So, they're on stilts and all that. So, they're kind of like a flash cubby house in Western standards, but they actually work. So, essentially, we're working with families. It's the first time they've ever had a front door or lights. So, our houses are built on stilts, so they're vermin and flood proof. They use under the house, and it has a concrete pad for cooking and cleaning and general living, and then the house itself is basically used for sleeping. Has solar lighting, fully insulated, guttering, so they can collect rainwater. We've sort of moved away over the years from working with families from rubbish dumps, and now we kind of specialise in working with families throughout Cambodia in the most remote parts, which is pretty much everywhere. When I got up to 6 houses, I was kind of, woohoo, 6 houses, I was pretty stoked with that. I think we're up to 318 now. So
crazy, eh?
So yeah, it's come a long way. My big thing is I got a bit of a thorn in my side about the whole charity world though in general, and I think a lot of people do.
I've had a bit of a weird experience with some charity stuff.
Yeah. I remember you were saying to me the other week, but we all hear these stories about money just doesn't get there. People getting paid crazy wages and all that. I mean, I don't get it. I mean, if you're going to do something charitable, well, it should be based on that. I mean, why does someone need to be paid vast amounts of money to help poor people? I don't get that at all. So our sort of bragging rights is showing the charity world that, we run on an oily rag, and we've made a significant difference for very little money. One of our houses costs, we've just put it up actually, it's they're up to $2,350 built and delivered.
US, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, we've got a little factory on the edge of Phnom Penh. So we pre-build the houses flat pack. Then the only people that get paid are the locals themselves.
Yeah.
Then we ship the house out, and then put a house up in basically 4.5 hours, and then there's the concrete footings and things like that. The family also receive a welcome gift package, which would be like mosquito net, bedding, new towels, detergents, rice, and things like that.
Yeah.
It's always a bit different depending on who the family are. Sometimes it can be footwear as well. Sometimes the kids have never had shoes. And we work with the families to, try and help and ensure to get the kids into school. And with that too, actually, we've done a couple of schools as well. Work with, do a bit of stuff with Operation Smile, because we work in all these remote areas. So sometimes we will find kids or people who are in need of pretty major medical work.
Yeah.
So we partner with these other organisations. So we're sort of like their eyes and ears that helps them out. It's come a long way. It's still very much grassroots. Firmly want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what's with like the charity thing? Like, say people in your position where you've got like some runs on the board. Obviously, you've built like 300 houses, and would it be easy for you then? And I'm talking on like the darker side of charity. Like, is it now an easy thing where someone in your position could like take it and run with it and turn it into a bit of a cash cow that really doesn't feed into the actual charity side of it? Like, is that sort of what happens?
Look, I think you can for sure. Actually, funny enough, I had a Canadian lady I had breakfast with probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And she said to me, what would I do if I gave you $1 million? And she was quite a genuine donor and stuff, and they'd actually sponsored a couple of houses and things like that. And sort of, took me a bit by surprise and stuff. And basically, long and short of it, I said to her at the end of the breakfast, I said, in all honesty, it's a nice offer, but it's not who we are. It would change who we are. We would need to then hire additional people. We'd need to grow a lot bigger and all that. And honestly, I wouldn't know what to do with the money. And we just don't work like that. And so she was a bit taken back, but kind of understood the angle where we were coming from of wanting to stay grassroots. And I certainly don't want to make money poverty. Essentially, it's the motorbike tours that covers the daily run-ins of the operation. While we're building houses, we make enough profit, so we could. It depends on where the house is going to, the location, the likes, but we might make $200 to $300 profit per house. Then that money will offset and pay the factory rent, power, staff wages, and that. If we're not building houses and there's that lull, I'll cover the costs. I still cover the costs of a couple of wages for the staff direct ourselves through the motorbike tours.
Yeah.
But these days it's become its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so it is easy for people to take advantage of those type of
look,
operations.
I think it is. I mean, I've seen it a lot. For a little while there, I was helping someone that was investigating some pretty corrupt charities in different locations and stuff. And once you start looking at some of these organisations that look very shiny and very glossy and stuff, they're almost like stage plays that are put together to pull the heartstrings of people and get big checks off donors. And pretty concerning.
Weren't you saying there's a guy that will like raise money for you? He's like really good at charity, but he keeps like some crazy percentage for himself. So I won't say. You don't have to name names.
Yeah. I don't know his name actually, but no. So, people out there now that specialise in raising funds for charities, so they'll actually go to a charity and go, well, I feel we could raise $50 million or more for you. And of course, the charity go, wow, that'd be incredible. And they go, well, we can raise $50 million, but we want 60% of it. And so for a lot of these charities, they go, okay, well, we're still getting 40%. And literally these people raising the money are pocketing, tens of millions of dollars. And which is crazy. I mean, I don't know how, they can justify getting away with it. Because, I mean, there's so many charities around the world.
What's the legalities around that?
I don't know. I think they write it off as like admin fees and costs for raising and employing people, and it's pretty disturbing.
And I think because like I'm not a big charity person, like I don't really give money. Like I always will give money to like guide dogs and shit that sort of like counters for coffees and stuff. But like that's really as far as my charitability goes, because like I've just got such a weird distrust for it. You do see, like I've had that experience that I was telling you about, and I was like, this is fucking very clear what's going on here. And it's really concerning that, because it's like it is a good message. And like there was, I said there was one of the facts of like, well, I'll still sort of go along with it because if it helps one person, then it's worth it. But it's such a fucking weird slippery slope, isn't it? And
well, I spent 4.5 years of my life flying in and out of Cambodia. Become very passionate in what I was doing in helping and stuff and working in the field. And it literally took me 4 years to work out what was going on. And I felt really kind of stupid in a lot of ways that I just couldn't see it. But once the penny dropped, then
everything.
Yeah, it just all come together. And then when I left, and some of the people that had remained thought I was just off the rails and making these ridiculous
allegations,
and stuff. And then they all got it, and they one by one they left, and they were the same. They just go, and they just felt foolish, and it was pretty, but it was kind of good in a way because I got to see it firsthand, and now I can almost smell it. I've seen different charities and stuff and met with them, and I don't know. There's just
human nature, though, isn't it?
It's human nature. But it's pretty twisted to use poverty to pull the heartstrings of people to essentially get money.
Some people are so like disconnected, though. Like narcissism is I feel like you want to talk about like mental health and the way that people talk about that shit these days. man, I think we need to start a conversation about narcissism, because so many people, it's just like they're so into things for themselves that it becomes almost like this fucking pathological, like psychotic thing. Like, it's psychotic in my view to rip off a charity. Like, you see poor people in Cambodia, the poorest of the poor, and you can get a meal ticket out of that and like make a lot of money, and it's like that seems to me like an extreme case of narcissism.
Well, yeah, and what I have found with a lot of these people involved with these charities, they almost get to a point where they feel that they're like a bit of a superhero. Yeah. You know, and they really gloat on what they're doing, but they're actually not doing it. You know, they're riding on their own bullshit. Yeah. Basically.
A lot of people that is like, they start spinning this web and then believing, and then like at the start they know they're full of shit, but then it's like the further down this hole they go, like your brain has a weird way of like actually believing the shit that you knew was a lie to start with.
Well, it's pretty crazy when you see some of these NGOs, they should call them, non-government organisations, these charities, and you see some of the motor vehicles they're getting in, and they're driving around in brand new black Lexus 4-wheel drives, and they're chauffeur driven, and the problem for a lot of charities too that I found that they base themselves around major cities. Yeah, and you know, and none of them work together. They all work in opposition. Yeah, which was pretty crazy too, because there was a couple of projects I worked on, and I thought, well, I should get in contact with this organisation over here because I know that they've used solar. Yeah, so I can get some advice on them about, you know, who they use. And they go, oh, you can't talk to them. I go, well, why not? Because they go, well, they're our opposition. I go, well, I don't get that, because you're working in poverty. Wouldn't you pull together and share resources and that? And that was a bit of a thing too, you know. You go, that I couldn't get my head around that. Yeah. Yeah, anyway. And so this whole thing about being in cities, then they only work in a certain radius. And they go, well, why don't you work in these really, really remote areas? That's where the help is needed the most. Yeah, well, we don't work in those areas because it's too far away. And the reason it's too far away because it's inconvenient for them. Yeah, you
can't live in a nice house, and you can't drive your car on the nice roads,
and too far up in the air-conditioned cafes, and yeah, it's insane.
What's some, like, you've shared some stories, but like there's been some crazy success stories that you've had that have come out of like that, you know, the housing project with different families that you've helped. Like, what's some of the more remarkable stuff that you've seen with that?
Well, I mean, there's always a mixture of, you know, shock and, I mean, we work with the bottom of the barrel, the poorest of the poor.
Like, how poor are these people?
So, like I might have told you, that, you know, one of the first houses that I ever built, there was still like a test house, was for a family at Kompong Cham, and the youngest daughter from that family was suckling from the local village dogs, and I think Coit was about 3.5 when I first met her. And unfortunately, that family's just gone from tragedy to tragedy. They had a really nice mother. So the mother would have to go away and work in these distant rice fields and often wouldn't come back for days. And so the 3 young children were with a grandmother. They had no house, and they lived with their neighbours' livestock under the house, because everyone keeps their livestock immediately under the house overnight time. And because Coit's grandmother had cataracts, one day Coit's, you know, because they just eat like mashed rice with a little bit of fish or fermented fish and stuff, Coit's seen this dog with a litter of pups and started suckling. He's become quite well known in the village of going around and suckling. And the first time I met Coit, I could actually almost see that dog connection with her, because I was watching the way that she was with other dogs when we were wandering around the village. It kind of always had that dog stare, when dogs stare one another out. Yeah. She had lots of bite marks and scratches and things all over her. And then their mother got killed, and it was just... Anyway, the motorbike tours now look after those 3 kids, so they're living with an aunt, but we sponsor the 3 children because we were really worried that they were going to disappear into human trafficking or something like that.
Is that a big problem in Cambodia?
it can be a big problem. Families disappearing and children disappearing into Thailand, China.
What's the market for that?
Well, the sex industry. Big problem with parents going into Thailand and they end up in fishing boats, and they can be on a fishing boat for 7 years and never reach land.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a big problem. And a few cases I've sort of been pretty close to where kids have disappeared and they've kind of been funneled, through, might be Vietnam, and Vietnam's pretty good, like their border protection and all that sort of stuff. But of course, when there's money involved, that people push in through different ways and the likes, but ultimately they'll end up in China and be married off. Yeah.
That seems so crazy that shit still exists, eh?
Oh, it's big. It's a big industry. Yeah.
The one thing, like when we were over there, because a bunch of the people that were on the tour had built houses through the charity, and that were still like sort of on the tours. Yeah. And they were saying that like some of the big resistance they get met with is like, oh, we should be helping at home first. Like, what's your sort of thoughts on like that thought process? Yeah,
sure. So, a lot of people say, oh, charity starts at home. And yeah, sure, look, it does. And there's things that we openly get involved with still here in Australia. With some, rural things, we get involved with a lot of wildlife rescue centres and that. I've got a bit of a thing for that I like to be involved with.
Keep talking, I just got to let earlier.
Yep. No worries. And of course, also in Vietnam, we work with a wildlife anti-trafficking unit, which has had some really good success over the years because we ride in all these remote areas and the likes. But yeah, it's look, I think things with charity, I think it's just that general thing of people just being jaded. Yeah. You met with tins, you're getting confronted with people on streets, want you to, take up your time, and you just go, well, they're getting paid to be there, so that's, it's just a thing.
And I don't think people have a perspective here, because like we've got poverty in Australia, but like it's very rare there would be people living on rubbish dumps with babies suckling from dogs. Like it's a different level, and it is like, it made me think about it quite a bit to really wonder like that whole charity starts at home sort of conversation, because there is definitely like a valid point for that.
Sure.
But like at what point is there like a global initiative to like just raise the standard of living from like the poorest, most disadvantaged people in the world? Like what does the world look like if that level gets raised by quite a bit? Like how much better does it make the world as a whole?
I mean, the difference that we see for a family that we work with that receive a house, it just gives them the basic dignity. They're healthier. It changes their life in quite a dramatic way for very little money. We have a bit of a thing that, which is, it's always, so we get people that say, well, don't other families in the village get jealous when someone gets a house and they don't? And we actually never find that at all. Often the other families in the village, they'll go, oh, we're really happy that family got a house because their life was really difficult. Yeah. And everyone in the village is poor. So they're really supportive of one another. It makes a big difference. We have a bit of a thing. So the families in general, they get a house for free. They sign a contract with us, and the deal is you can't sell the house, you can't hock it, and you won't rent it and things like that. So really it's to protect the house. And sometimes, we're working with dysfunctional families where, the father might be might be an alcoholic or whatever, or the likes. And, often these families too are in debt. And it could only be like $50 in debt, but,
to make $50 in Cambodia.
Yeah, some of these families are lucky to be earning $1 a day. and the interest that they'll pay, and often the money that they borrow, it's usually because someone's been sick.
Yeah.
And that's how they become landless too, because a loan shark will come along, offer money to anyone in the village, wants to borrow a bit of money. They come across as sort of being caring people to want to help people out, but they're far from it. They lend the money, they get their basically their land title. So if that family defaults enough, they just take their land. And so, that's how a lot of the families end up on rubbish dumps. But essentially, all the families that we've given homes to, the success rate has been 99%.
Yeah.
And we work with local commune leaders and stuff like that. In fact, one of the lead people with our housing program is
the number one monk.
The number one monk.
How did that all come about?
We met a really long time ago. Chun's actually quite famous in his own right. Super.
Is there photos of him on the internet if you typed it in?
Yeah, probably.
Number one monk. No, that's an internal joke.
Yeah. Chun. So it's spelled CHHUN. And then Ben, BANN, I think it is. Chunban, and one more N, and then Cambodia. I've actually never Googled his name. There he is. There's a video there done by Joe a while ago.
Is that him
No,
go back and play that
There's
video.
one of the guys from Tempo though. If you go down a bit, that video there.
Oh, so that's the Global Village Housing video.
Yeah. So Chun's always in bright orange saffron. There's a couple of monks there, but that's Chun there on the left actually.
And so what was the story with him?
This is quite old. This video was done 5 years ago, so
yeah, it's
a bit rough.
Be cool to see I'm sure the houses have changed.
So that's Chun.
And so what was the story with him?
Well, there's one of the schools. So that is a school, and that's basically their classroom.
So that's literally just a patch of dirt with 4 desks and a whiteboard stuck to a tree.
Yeah.
A blue board.
Yeah.
And there's probably 30 kids there, 20 something kids there.
Yeah, so we've found that the couple of schools that we've done, which have basically been wooden huts.
So you've actually made the schools?
Yeah, we just we've done 2 schools in 2 years. Yeah. The first school we did, I think it had 85 students, and the time we renovated the school.
So that's one of the houses there.
Yeah, that's one of the old model houses. They look quite different now. And we do bicycles and stuff that. Yeah.
So with the school, 85 students.
Oh yeah, and the time we finished the school, it jumped to about 185.
Really?
Yeah. A big problem for a lot of these schools, particularly for girls that stop going to school once they get to that point of age, they stop going to school because there's no toilets. And no toilets, no drinking water, things like that. So a big thing that we put in toilet blocks and clean drinking water, put in wells. I think we've done something like about nearly 200 wells now. We can do a well for it's quite cheap, for a well with a pump on it, we can do it for about $300.
Really?
And I've seen these NGOs where they say, it costs, in the thousands and thousands of dollars. Yeah, well, I don't know why it's so expensive, because our wells have been very, very successful. Just hand pump, but it certainly makes a big difference to a lot of these rural communities and the likes. Some areas you've got to be a little bit careful, like places like Kompong Cham, there's actual natural arsenic in the ground.
Oh, really?
So, you got to be careful you're putting a well in there, otherwise all the locals will starve and their hair fall out and all sorts of horrible things. So, it does pay to do a bit of research along the way.
Just don't start digging.
Yeah.
How's your life changed with the charity stuff? I'm sure that there would be definitely a level of fulfillment that the average person is not going to feel, that doesn't, not to say that you're fucking better than anyone or whatever, or you're some angel saint, but it's like you've started doing it, it's gathered momentum, and now you've changed so many people's lives, and it's like it must be a crazy feeling to like sort of feel that, you know, as a guy that's just kind of like going through life, you know.
Look, I mean, I guess even though I'm the founder behind it, I certainly can't take all the credit. It's the dedicated team that it's behind it, that their hard work, and we've got a really good team. It's mainly made of locals, and we've got some volunteers that have got involved, and people who have been on our motorbike tours and stuff like that have got involved. But personally, yeah, look, I mean, it certainly does change the outlook on life. I don't feel the need to have all the blinging cars I used to have and stuff like that. I used to race Porsches and stuff for a while, and certainly don't feel the need for that anymore. But yeah, no, I think you have to get something out of it, and my thing out of it is a sense of achievement, and just knowing that you've had that opportunity to be able to help someone, and to be able to help them in the right way, and certainly not trying to be like some knight in shining armor. Yeah, because that
you definitely, like, that was what was interesting. Like when we first spoke about the charity, like you sort of associate those kind of people with. Seems like it becomes a big part of their identity. Yeah. Whereas with you, it's like just a thing that you do, as opposed to this like thing that you kind of attach your own self-worth to. But it's just interesting that, like you must get something out of it. Because I even know that like it feels good for me with just this podcast to get people that message and say certain topics and certain guests have helped them. And it's like, this is on a whole different level,
Look, it has been a quite a personal thing for me on a number of different levels as things have happened along the way. I mean, there's certainly been points of time where the initial running of it, I was literally running out of my own money, and I didn't think I could continue with it. And then, and it was a lot of work, taking up a big chunk of my life, and I was finding I was sort of struggling with that. And there's a fair bit of emotional part that's attached with it.
Yeah, I bet.
And then I just didn't want to give up on it and the likes. And then fortunately, Samantha, who I met some years ago, she's been fantastic, helping me do things. And well, she does a lot, actually, heaps. Then I also had that thorn in my side that, that I kind of felt like I kind of almost got scammed for 4.5 years, volunteering my time, a big chunk of my life, gave up a lot of things, and also probably neglected some of my family things back home. And so I wanted to kind of prove and put I guess in my own way, a bit of faith back into the charity world, that while we are registered as a charity, we actually weren't for a long time, because I kind of almost had that beef that I just didn't want to be registered as a charity, but we actually had to by law. Essentially, because really we more run on a social enterprise background. So essentially, as we're building houses, we make a little bit of profit that covers all the running costs and all that. And
so it's more like a socialist little environment that you're sort of doing.
That's right. So, a lot of the things of keeping it all going is, all these different elements. And I mean, I think you get hardened to it after a while. Some people I've taken into, different situations where they've been involved in one of our school building projects or a home build or whatever, it really rattles people to tears. And it's and I still find it now, even a home handover, the families are crying and all that, and they're not crocodile tears, they're real tears of emotion and stuff. And I think for a lot of these families, when this sudden housing, because when the families get a house, they actually don't know they're getting it. Literally until the day it arrives.
Really?
And I think there are families that have been through all sorts of challenges in their life, have been the poorest of the poor, and they've probably been scammed and ripped off and all sort of thing. And all of a sudden, someone comes along and go, well, we're going to give you a house, and they kind of go, well,
I've heard this before.
Yeah, where's the punchline, you know?
Yeah.
And in fact, one of the very first houses I built for a family, which was on a rubbish dump, a month and a half later, I went back to visit them, and they had these plastic bags in the corner, and I said, oh, you know, what are the plastic bags? You know, what's going on here? And they just said, oh, that's just their stuff's all, you know, packed. And I go, why is it packed? What's going on? And they just said, oh, because they were just expecting at some point they were just going to get kicked out. They just couldn't get their head around that this house was actually theirs. And so we had to reaffirm with them, go, no, this is your house. And this is before we did these agreements and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so they just couldn't get their head around it. But yeah, no, it's overall, it does really change the outlook on life and stuff. So you do get something out of it, and for good merit too.
Did you always see your life being like this when you were younger?
Not really, no.
Like it's kind of, you've lived a really crazy life between all the businesses and the work that you've done. Like, I don't know, like what do you think has led you to live such a weird life?
I mean, I guess I've been fairly generous. Like, there has been people that I've been able to help out through life, different things. I don't know what makes me. I guess everyone's different. I couldn't really put myself in a nutshell. My own upbringing was a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, because you got 10 siblings, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy in itself.
Yeah, and it was very much a dysfunctional family, multiple fathers and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't grow up with most of my brothers and sisters and all that sort of thing. And moved around a lot and all that sort of stuff. So, and then I certainly, I started business from a very young age, and I learned from a very young age that it was going to be the only way I'm going to get anywhere in life is, on my own bat. And so I think that sort of makes you appreciate things a bit harder because I've had to work for it all. Not that I have a lot, but everything I have, I've worked for. And I think it's always been a bit of a stepping stone, improving stone. Like it's like anything in life. Like when you get your first car, you kind of go, "Hoo, I got my car," and then it's the next thing. The next thing's like renting a house or buying a house. It's all those achievements, and I think I sort of had that all the way along. And I left school from a very young age. I left school and started an apprenticeship when I was 15. I didn't have a very good education, mainly because I wasn't there most of the time. And I kind of had that thing that I wanted to prove to people that I could be something and all that. And then I think it was just that natural thing that I kind of get to that point where I was doing quite well for myself. I had property and cars and all that sort of stuff. And then I'd seen that sort of thing with, I do like challenges and thinking outside the box. And then to see the poverty in Cambodia, and I thought, I thought I could do something. Wasn't really sure what it was I could do. It took me a bit of time to find my way, and I've come up with this housing design, which has been quite successful. So I'm pretty happy with that.
What was the first business that you did? Like, where did you start?
Sunday market.
Really?
Yeah, me and my brother. So a bit of a thing was we'd go around to other storeholders. So it was very much then, it was like a real trash and treasure thing. People would just go there to sell their crap out of their garage.
Like a flea market sort of deal.
Like a flea market. Buying their stuff and then setting up our own store with the stuff that we just bought. And then I come up with a bit of an idea of ripping people's plants out. So like going through I don't know if I can still be arrested for this or not. It was a long time. I think I was about 8 years old. And selling plants, literally no pots.
And he's just going and fleece people's plants from their garden and sell it back to them.
pretty much, yeah.
Entrepreneurial spirit right there.
Yeah, we made coin, but we just wasted on food and pinball machines and stuff like that.
And when did you get into like legitimate business?
about 3 weeks ago. I had multiple jobs sort of over the years when I was younger. But then,
what did you do your apprenticeship in?
I was actually a plasterer or mold maker.
Really?
Yeah, it was a bloody horrible trade.
Yeah.
I dumped that after about 18 months, and there was dudes working there that'd been there for like 30 years, and I'm just looking at these guys, and I was just arseholes, and just it was just a dead end job, and we were basically working in this plaster factory, which was once a butter factory, and it was on this river, and it's just crawling with rats, and it was just an absolute shithole in a small country town. And then my parents moved, and so I had to hitchhike to this job, and literally it was like 35 k's, but this is like hitchhiking like 4:30 in the morning to try and get there at 8 in the morning, and it was like foggy mornings, car would go past once an hour,
Yeah, I imagine it'd be pretty hard to be on time for work.
Yeah, and then sometimes I'd finish like work at like 3:30 in the afternoon, but I wouldn't get home until like 7 o'clock at night, just from getting hitchhiking and that. So it was, pretty challenging. Anyway, so I had different jobs and stuff over the years, but I actually started the company and won the business award in 1991. The business award was sponsored by Operation Livewire. It was sponsored by Shell Australia.
Oh, yeah.
There was about 3,000 entrants, and I come second. So that was a bit of a thing at the time. I'd already started the business. I was working from a garage of a rental property, doing furniture restoration.
Yeah.
And then over the course of years, pretty much furniture restoration was always a one-man band. Mine was kind of a bit like that, a little bit bigger, but then I took it to a next level of I got involved in doing insurance repair work, probably looking after high-end insurance claims. I had clients with $200,000 dining room tables, and
really, how do you get a $200,000 dining room table?
You'd be wealthy, very wealthy. It might be something like what makes a $200,000? I don't know.
Is it a cookie dinner?
Yeah, well, funny enough, I when they were building Crown Casino, I was following that with great interest, because Crown Casino, they built it in the mid '90s, cost $2.3 billion to build.
Oh, really?
And I ended up, before the property opened, I ended up tracking a guy by the name of Glenn Morecambe down, and I the long and short of it, I got the furniture fit out contract for Crown Casino. So there was 15,500 pieces of furniture on the property, plus all the stone work and timber work and gold leaf work throughout Crown, and looking after that famous suite that they had that was $28,000 a night to stay there and that sort of thing. So that was a pretty big gig that I got. Still, as it always stayed really small, never had many staff.
That's the thing that, like, all of our conversations and the random stories that pop up, it's like you've always had, like, obviously such a crazy nose for, like, the hustle. And you could always, like, tracking down that one guy to get that one contract.
Yeah.
Like, there's just something that you seem to have always been able to do, which is, like, figure out how to be in the right place at the right time. Because, like, when people could say, like, oh, that's lucky, but, like, you can sort of manufacture luck in business with the right ideas, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the thing with Crown. They were talking about, how lavish. I mean, Crown Casino has its own postcode. And, they were showing, glimpses of this, lavish, fit out and things like that. And I thought, I wonder if they got someone to look after it. And it actually took me about 3 weeks to actually track this guy down. And once I got a hold of him, he said, when can you come in? So I did a whole walkthrough of the entire property before it opened its doors. And he said, what can you do? So we walked through, and can you do that? Can you do that? I go, yeah, I can do all that. And I had the skills for it and all that. And yeah, had my own workshop in there and stuff.
That's got to be like Because that is like really like a life-changing thing. Like you would have had to just stop pretty much everything else and just like move in and do that, right?
Yeah, it was to a certain degree, but the insurance industry was like a bit of a feast or famine. So, a big storm would hit an area and all of a sudden we'd be inundated with work. So it was like balancing between the casino and doing insurance work and all that sort of thing, and it paid really well. And then, of course, once I got this contract with Crown, it sort of, I got this real status, because some of the claims I'd work on have been these high-end customers, blue ribbon policy holders, they like to call them.
Yeah.
And, they don't want just Joe Blow wandering into their house and working on their prized possessions and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the loss adjuster go, oh, well, this is the guy that looks after Crown Casino. And they go, oh, all right. What's he do there? Oh, he looks after all the fit out. So, it was a good thing to have,
Such a bizarre, like...
Yeah, it was.
Like, you think about, like, ways to make money.
Yeah.
And it's like that, it seems like such a left field way, but like somebody's got to do it, right? Like somebody has to be the guy that does that fit out.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, they spend a lot of money in doing it. Who was it that we were touring with that, he was...
Chook that does all that. That's sort of like along the same lines. Like
that's right.
One of the guys, Chook, he made this business out of doing super yacht fit outs. It's like, how do you make it? Where do you start to make a business of doing super yacht fit outs? And he started by just basically like going down to the docks and watching the people come on and off these super yachts, because in Cairns they're all the super yachts, they'll sort of like tour and they'll pull in at the harbour. So like he would just go and he luckily had all the skills, and then he ended up doing like the crazy, like some of his stories, man, and just like the craziest shit. It's like the ways that you can
glass staircases,
carbon fiber, like huge carbon fiber pieces, and like they're moving $1 million paintings around so that he can do like work on these boats. And it's like there's just so many random ways to make money that people don't think of, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, and so when you've got these multi-million-dollar boats and things like that, and stuff gets banged and knocked around and all that and starts looking shabby, you need someone that can ideally come in there and do restoration work. I think Chook was saying that they were doing restoration work and the like. So, it was the same with us. It was insane to understand that people would have, we were an authorised repairer for Steinway. You're working on a piano. It's a $220,000 piano. I mean, it's pretty insane to think that people spend that much money.
What makes a piano worth that much money?
I'm not quite sure, but they're very expensive.
You break that big problem.
Oh yeah, big problem. I mean, it was funny. I remember once I worked on 2 Steinway pianos at Melbourne Faculty of Music, and they had 2, and they're going to sell them or trade them in because they were buying 2 new ones, which were about $220,000 each. So they wanted me to go over these existing pianos that they had to try and fix them up so they could sell them, get a high price or trade them in or whatever. And the sides were all damaged on the pianos. And because when they'd roll them on and off the stage, in and out the back, the door wasn't quite wide enough. So every time they go through the doorway, they go bang, 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 bang. And because they're in this black polyester finish, so they're all chipped and damaged. So instead of spending a few $100s and making the doorway a little bit bigger, they were just destroying these pianos. So it was good to actually see that while I was there working on these pianos, there was actually a guy putting an additional door in that I think it was cost about $500 or something,
Yeah, that seems crazy to have a $250,000 piano and you're ruining it because of a $300 doorway.
That's right, that someone couldn't go, yeah, maybe we should make the door bigger.
And so you weren't working on any of like the actual musical components of the piano?
No,
right?
no.
So it was just like all the timber work and stuff like that?
That's right, yeah.
And then is that the same time when you started doing like the Porsche racing and stuff? How'd you get into all that?
Well, yeah, I mean, while it was just club level stuff. I was never a front line runner by any means. Money makes speed.
Yeah.
I was pretty good at steering a car, but never had the real money behind me. And I just sort of always had a bit of a thing for Porsches and stuff like that. And just got into that for a while, and it was good.
That would have been pretty... That's like one of my things I'd like to do at some point is race a car.
Oh, yeah.
But it's money.
Yeah.
It's definitely like it's a pay to play sport.
I think it's easier now with modern cars and technology. It's a lot easier to set a car up. But of course, what looks easy once you look at it, I mean, it's a bit like looking at, like a trophy truck or whatever.
Yeah.
When you start looking at them close and you see what's in them, and it's no different to, Porsche Car Club. You look at some of these cars and from the outskirts, and they're still road registered, but the money that's put into them.
Was yours road registered, the one that you were racing?
Still road registered. Probably not roadworthy if I had to get it re-registered, but yeah.
How was your experience at Fink? Because after meeting, so Toby was on the tour, and it was after Dakar, which unfortunately he couldn't ride because of his wrist.
Yeah.
But then you jumped on board as one of Toby's sponsors, and then actually went out to Fink. What was that experience like compared to all the racing that you've done in the past?
Oh, I mean, I think overall, I reckon it's probably the best motoring event I've been to in Australia by far.
Yeah.
And for that it was seeing all the people who were there camping alongside the track, and got their fires going, having a beer, and I and it was a real journey getting there. I mean, fortunately for me, we went there in a helicopter, so
it was a journey to get there.
Yeah.
We're in an R44.
Yeah,
dropped the fuel cap in the desert.
Yeah. So Leon, that was on the tour with us, had a helicopter or a few, and so we flew there, and we were sort of like just bar hopping, and that was pretty cool. Well, not bar hopping, but overnight stays in places that had bars. But I thought it was fantastic, and I certainly look forward to going to the one next year.
You think you're gonna be on board with that for a bit to come, you reckon?
Might have to sell my soul again to finance it or something.
Bloody Matty drives a hard bargain, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard to get space on that truck these days. It seems like quite a coveted little piece of real estate.
Yeah, I've still got strong interest to actually have some signage on the tail shaft.
On the tail shaft?
Well, it's always, I remember an old friend of mine years ago, he was racing a V8 supercar, and he put his car on the roof, and it was one of the best bits of advertisement he had, and someone actually had advertisement under the car, and it just sat there on its roof. That'd
be like a spot in V8s, eh? You'd have to think that there'd be some, that'd be like a worthwhile piece of...
And seeing the way that Toby drives, the possibility of being
on its roof.
Yeah, highly likely.
Toby will run into a big problem.
I just couldn't believe that the air he drives that car like it was a dirt bike.
It's crazy, eh? Yeah. It's so crazy when you think about all of those guys that are in the trophy trucks. Like when they pre-run, they're in cars, but they can't use the actual trophy truck. So none of those guys, and this is what I think makes him so good at that event, is none of those guys pre-run it at speed. The only time that they really learn the track at speed is in their race runs. Toby's the only dude that can get out of his trophy truck and onto a bike and go, really he can go faster than what he can go in the trophy truck, and learn that track at that speed and know every hole, know every turn, but at speed. None of those guys have that advantage, and I just think like it cannot be overstated how big of a deal that is. That's the reason he can just jump in those trophy trucks, and the way that he can push through the dust compared to those other guys, because they're driving blind, and he's been at that speed. Like he knows exactly what's coming up and when it's coming up.
Yeah, someone was telling me that some points of the track he actually drives, if there's dust there, he actually drives by the top of the trees. He knows the top of the trees that well.
Isn't that just insane?
Yeah, that is insane. And some of those points where they just get this massive air, it's kind of like on a kink on the track and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it's insane.
Those trucks are just really crazy pieces of machinery, aren't they?
That first morning, we'd gone out about 4:30 in the morning, so we got ahead of the trophy truck, and because we were in a couple of the support vehicles, and then we stopped at the point, and it was on a bit of a crest, and we're waiting because we knew Toby was basically on the pole run to come along. I mean, you could literally hear him coming from about what sounded like 3 kilometres away. You could just hear this raw, and this dust in the distance. And yeah, it was like a kind of got it now. Like you get that real chill, and you go, "Holy shit, here he comes!"
He's fucking moving,
fucking on it.
Yeah,
yeah, and just that was impressive.
Do you think that you'd ever get in and do that race in like a buggy or a truck, or do you think that's something you'd ever do?
Oh, it'd be great to do it. I'd probably be the slowest. But yeah, no, it would be great. Those side-by-sides look pretty cool.
They do look pretty cool, eh?
And there were some pretty fast side-by-sides there, because there was actually not that long after Toby went through, there was a side-by-side, and I was really surprised that it was right up there. I don't know whose it was or whatever, but yeah, geez, yeah, they're pretty fast.
Yeah, well, some of them are like 1,000 cc's and got like turbos and shit in them, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And they're only going to improve from here too. Like, they're going to get better and better, obviously.
Could you imagine if that becomes like a real possibility to like really race that? Because I think right now it's a bit of a punish, but like it'd be cool if you could do that race fairly comfortable in one of those side-by-sides, like as they get better, like Mick said.
Well, I was driving one of the vehicles that was I don't know whose vehicle it was. It certainly wasn't mine, but I drove it from Alice Springs to Fink, and you got that dirt road that follows the track.
Yeah.
And you can't help but as you're driving it, you kind of get faster and faster. And at one point we were cruising along, and I kind of looked out, and we were keeping up with one of the buggies.
On the service road there.
On the service road.
Fucking hell. we were in a Ford, it was like a Ford F-250 or something like that. We're trying to recover one of Toby's vehicles. One of the I don't think he's ever even finished it. But yeah, so anyway, one of the years that he wrecked the car, and the whole right front end just completely got ripped out on that road, because we were just hooking, had a trailer on, and the boys are just fucking hooking into this thing, and the whole front end of the car just got fucking ripped off. So that had to we were going to get Toby because his truck was on a flatbed, and then this thing had to get put on a flatbed. I think it cost like 10 grand to fix this fucking F-150.
It was pretty funny that day when we headed off early to be in front of the trophy truck and the likes, and Robbie Madison was with us.
Oh, yeah.
And we had to pick him up from the casino in Alice Springs.
Yeah.
And then we headed off, and at some point, because it was still pitch black, and then in the middle of nowhere there was this ATM. And go, what the fuck? There was an ATM, a phone box, some old motorbike and stuff, and it was just this really weird thing. And then further along, we stopped at someone's camp, and we just pulled up, and they're all still asleep in their swags and stuff like that. And man, it was so funny. Like, yeah, it was just classic.
But then Dad knew we grew up racing with them.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
Dad rocks up to this like campsite in the middle of the fucking nowhere. And it was like 6 a.m. or something by this point. They're all still in their swags. And didn't Robbie? Wasn't he trying to get?
He cooked up a storm.
Yeah, so they just stopped to do breakfast or something, and then the boys jump out of their tent, and we grew up racing with them. Jaden Etherington, and then he's like, Pete, what the fuck? And then these like Pete and Robbie Madison rock up with Thatcher, and they just end up having bacon and eggs in the middle of the fucking desert randomly with the people we grew up with.
Yeah,
that was one of the cool things with, I mean, obviously I've been up there so much as a kid with going up into Cape York, but like it's pretty amazing how much space is in Australia. Like, we've just got this country, we've got obviously a lot of people live in it, but like you go north from Cairns and it's just space, just open space, beautiful landscape. Like, I just don't think many Australians really appreciate, and I think the Fink is the same. Like, when you go through, you ride through the Simpson Desert to get out there, or whatever it is, however you do get out there, cross the Nullarbor from Adelaide to Perth, it's like we just live in such a vast land. Yeah,
it is big. I mean, as you know, I've driven up in the mighty Defender from
Melbourne,
from Victoria, with a couple of dirt bikes and that on the back, and the swag and all the gear, and I've done a fair bit of back road through cattle stations and stuff in the 4-wheel drive, to get to Cairns, and just taking these different routes. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it is such a big country. It's insane. And
so diverse. Like, from where you come from, when you're in like in the bottom of Victoria, to then the very tip of Australia. Like, it's pretty insane just the types of terrain that you even kind of pass through, and the different landscapes, the different weather patterns, the different, like, everything. It's so insane, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for anyone that hasn't done it, you've got to do it. It's well worth it. And we're like swagging it every night, and in those places we were staying, we were pulling into a little town. It's a little country pub, and we're camping at the back, and they were the real highlights too. In between,
so fun, eh?
It was as much fun off the bike as well it was on. And pull up these pubs, cold beer, good local food. It was fantastic.
How's one night we're at the pub at Cohen, and we'd had definitely a few drinks. We were all pretty lit by the time we went to bed, so we all there was me, Jason, Chook were the last ones up. So we're in the swag, and and this music starts up at the pub, and we sort of saw this dude setting up all this PA shit. And
I thought he was a DJ or something.
Yeah, we thought this DJ was coming. But this dude basically just played backing tracks and sang karaoke. And he was maybe the worst singer I have ever heard in my entire life. And we were all like tucked away in the swags. You got up, didn't you? And
no, I said to you.
Oh, you didn't in the end.
Can you hear how bad this guy is? I mean, he's so bad. I want to go and watch it.
Like, it was full on, eh? But like the whole trip was just full of the most random shit like that, eh? Fucking classic.
Plenty of random stuff along the way.
All right, so we'll wrap this up. It's been bloody 2.5 hours.
Has it really?
Yeah, it goes quick. So people, how can they get in touch with the motorcycle tours if they want to see the real Vietnam?
See the real Vietnam? So Vietnam motorbike tours. With that said, it is a bit of a thing, Asians being Asians and stuff, that our name has become a bit generic, and people have started using our name and sometimes our photos on their websites and all sorts of things. But our website is quite distinctive in the logo and all that sort of thing. But yeah, it's VietnamMotorbikeTours.com. And of course, over in Cambodia, where we run dirt bike tours, it's CambodiaMotorbikeTours.com.
Yep. So we are going back in February. We're locked in for another trip. Pretty sure. We're doing
early February, and we're doing 3 countries. So we're starting in Nha Trang in Vietnam, which is where our home base and our headquarters is.
So I'll get to go to your rib house.
You will, yeah.
Jeff's got a ribs restaurant over there. How many ribs do you go through a month?
1.5 tons
a month.
1.5 tons of ribs a month.
Yeah, that's something like that. Yeah.
That's insane.
It obviously varies a bit with seasons and all that, but yeah, it's a lot. That's just in rib. So
that's so gnarly. Eh?
Popular,
good food.
So the ride that we're doing, we start in Nha Trang, and we basically head to the Cambodian border, cross over into Cambodia, cross into Stong Tray, then we make our way to Siem Reap, which is home of the mighty Angkor Wat. And then we'll spend a day exploring the temples there, and then from there make our way.
You said they're like crazy temples, right?
Oh, you haven't seen temples until you've seen these.
Really?
It's off the hook. Yeah, absolutely amazing. Yeah.
What would we Google? I want to.
Just Google Angkor Wat. No, there's the spelling there on the right. ANGKOR. Yep. So then after that, we'll make our way to the border of southern Laos, and we'll go through there.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, the photos don't do it justice. So when you see it firsthand,
that's incredible.
So that big building there, so that's Angkor Wat itself, and that's a moat all the way around the main structure, and that's to actually keep the ground, stabilize the pressure in the ground to stop it collapsing. But apparently that moat took 28 years to hand dig. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, I can't wait for that, because I remember you telling me about that on the Cape trip, but I never actually Googled it. So through there and then
into southern Laos.
Yep.
And through some really remote areas there, and then we cross back into Vietnam, and we'll actually finish back into Nha Trang.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so nice big loop.
So yeah, anyone can jump on that website, book a tour from themselves. Is that tour full, or is there still places on our tour?
I think that's done because we've got another tour running at the same time.
Yeah, okay.
So at that time, yeah, it's pretty busy.
And then Global Village Housing is the name of the charity that builds the houses for the people in Cambodia.
Yep.
I would like to do a Gypsy Tales house, so I think at some point we're probably going to start like a bit of a GoFundMe page or something like that. Just it'd be really cool to raise enough money to just build one house through the listeners of the podcast. So that's going to be a little bit of a goal of mine. Yep. Hopefully we can get something going with that. But yeah, it's been awesome. I'm glad you could come in and on your way back through Melbourne and.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had some awesome adventures already this year, and we've got, it's not long until February, right? So it's back on again. Helmets on.
Helmets on. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And,
thanks for having me.
It's been cool to learn a little bit more about like your backstory and some of the other stuff that you're into, because obviously you pick up little bits and pieces, you know. I feel like there's still so much more stuff that obviously you don't cover, but thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Appreciate it. You. Well done, mate.
Fucking hell, was that 2.5 hours?
Yeah.